Let the run fill up a little bit. Fill up a little bit, get it going there.
Oh boy.
People come in there, get them in the building, fill up a little bit. Man, get this chair crap.
It's DQ, baby. Pseudo Killas, what up? What up? What up? Check. Tapping in, what's the subject? Evolution or revolution, we ain't done yet. Laying flat like Sanchez, it's a bomb threat. I know my flow like Angozi. Source up and show me, homie. You shut up and mute up a moment. The mad scientist, I'm knowing all the components. We own it, and we gon' off it if it's pseudo. You do know we don't entertain that keyboard judo. That big body banger out of Baltimore. Done it all, shopper folks. Sold a little something, but I taught you more than your average teacher. I had to reach you at your level to bring you up. No devil can never beat you. With precision of a magi, the information supplied by some guys get debunked on live. CK and Juju, I chill in the cut. But if you boys wanna fade, then I'm chefing you up. I organized lie, defeats a disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers, space sage Africans, back again. An organized lie, defeats a disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers, space sage Africans, tapping in. I always been fly, that's an actual omen. You can catch me in the sky, ask Anthony Bowman. You see me with his telescope, I was actually floating off some good kush. The Sadio is actually growing. See, Gullah and Kent is where the money gets spent. Them boys got some books that cost as much as your rent. The second verse should be smash Rockwell, but I rock well. Underground like Sumerian Rockwells. In the ring like I'm the Rockwell. Hell, create a different wave that can rock whales. Hell, shit swell like lunar tides. My entendres off Gandra to who describe. Euthanize foolish guys. Scholastically, haphazardly. Turn your camera on and look me in my eyes. And please do subscribe. 8 to 80, blind, cripple, or crazy. You in for a new surprise. It's DQ, a organized lie. Defeats a disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers, space sage Africans, back again. An organized lie, defeats a disorganized truth every time. Kudos, who those niggas? Decorated pseudo killers, space sage Africans, tapping in.
A well-organized lie defeats a disorganized truth every time. Woo-hoo-wee. Man, y'all already know what it is, man. It's the Pseudo Killas on deck. And we come to do, we got to do, and we're going to do, we got to do. We standing tall, we standing strong. Hey, community of skeptics is in the building. Juju, what it do? What it do? What it do? How you doing, sis?
A beat before Hodier? No, I'm good. Thank you.
The BB deal.
No, I'm good.
Wow.
I'm excited. You know, this is what we do. We bring experts to you, to your fingertips, so we can actively engage, and you just don't have to take our word for it.
Right.
So yeah.
Important documents all day. We moving quick. What's going on, Miss Tiff? How you doing?
I'm good.
Kill official. How you feeling, sis?
I'm feeling wonderful.
Yeah, good to have you on.
All righty.
Enjoying that. Okay, we moving quick. Space Age African, Anthony Bowman. What's good, man? How you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Peace to everybody.
All right, we in the building, man. I see we got the building filling up. I see you, Jody Breeze. How you doing? Skinny Head TV. What's good? What it do? Who else we got? TNBN. What it do? What it do? How you doing? G Love. How you feeling? I see the bar reloaded. I see you. See you, Tiny. What's good? I see you, Smalls. What it do? All right, man. We're gonna get this without further ado, man. Real quick. You want to read that little bio you got there, Miss Tiff? We want to make it quick. We don't want to use up the time. We want
Not a problem. Not a problem.
real quick.
All right. J. Anderson Thomson Jr. is an American psychiatrist and writer. He is a trustee of the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science and a board member of the Center of Inquiry. He is staff psychiatrist for counseling and psychological services at the University of Virginia Student Health Center, as well as the University of Virginia's Institution of Law, Psychiatric and Public Policy. Thomson also has his own private practice and is a forensic psychiatrist for Region 10 Community Service. Thomson acquired his BA from Duke University in 1970. He acquired his MD from the University of Virginia in 1974. And he did his adult psychiatric training at the University of Virginia from 1974 to 1977.
All right, without further ado, what's going on, Andy, man? How you feeling, man?
Good.
Welcome to the platform, man.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, we want to get right into it. I know you got a lot of powerful information, man. I first ran across your work looking at you was doing some work on the Dawkins Foundation. You was doing a video, you was talking to the crowd, and the lecture was absolutely dynamic. And I was like, okay, got to get in touch with them. I'm appreciating the information. And in our conversation, you talked about how 9/11 kind of affected the process and where you was going with some of your work.
Yeah, my son was in the World Trade Center complex on 9/11, and mercifully he survived. And I started researching suicide terrorism. I was already an atheist, and I stumbled into just already as early as 2001 a lot of information on the psychology of religion, the why and how human minds generate religious beliefs. And I was stunned that this information was not out there. And that led me to put together the talk that you heard, which I think was in Atlanta. There's a lot more since. And my bias, as you'll hear, is that we really basically know the fundamentals of why and how human minds generate religious beliefs, why we're vulnerable to them. And that's going to be the essence of the talk today, is laying out the mechanisms.
Yeah, and I take that.
No, I was going to say, but it was 9/11 that started all this.
Okay. All right. Well, there we have it, man. Let's get right into it. We got a lot of information. We're going to have time for questions from the audience, man. We want to really get into this build. I think it's very important for the Black community to be able to access information that they're not really familiar with. Super solid. And you know what? Let's go, Andy. I'm going to put up your presentation, man. Let's get right into this, man.
Okay. I can't see you, so is it okay to start?
Yeah, you good.
Okay.
Let's go. I'm pulling everybody out the thing off the stage. Let's go.
On the dogmas of religion, as distinguished from moral principles. All mankind, from the beginning of the world to the present day, have been fighting, quarreling, burning, and torturing one another over abstractions unintelligible to themselves and to all others, and absolutely beyond the comprehension of the human mind. Thomas Jefferson wrote those words in 1816. And the essence of my talk today is this. Should you run into Mr. Jefferson next week, you could say to him, "No, Mr. President, religion is no longer beyond the comprehension of the human mind. We are tantalizingly close to a comprehensive psychology, a comprehensive cognitive neuroscience of religious belief. We understand how and why human minds generate religious beliefs and why we are all vulnerable to them. The basic mechanisms are increasingly being laid out. Robust theories, empirical evidence. And we are in that position, Mr. President, because in 1816, when you wrote those words, there was a 7-year-old boy in England, Charles Darwin, who would grow up to give us the only workable explanation we have for the design of all life on Earth, the design and architecture of all life on Earth, including the design and architecture of the human mind. And when Darwin published his great work, The Origin of Species, he knew that his discovery would illuminate psychology. Psychology will be based on a new foundation. And it took us about 150 years to start really applying evolutionary theory to the human mind and the architecture of the human mind. And it's pieces of that architecture, evolved pieces of that architecture that go into generating religious beliefs and religious ideas. What are my goals today? My goals are to give you the basic mechanisms that we all carry that evolve for other purposes that leave us vulnerable to supernatural beliefs and to religious beliefs. And what I'd like to do, first of all, again, is to thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for coming out on a Saturday afternoon to hear this. I very much appreciate the opportunity. Let me give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to do. And you might want to have something to write on, because occasionally I will give you some references that I think you want to look up. And you may want to keep a little scorecard as we go through this. Another way of thinking about what I'm going to do, it's going to be like a 10-course tapas meal. Okay, they're going to be 10 courses. And the first is going to be the modern Darwinian synthesis. The second is going to be human evolution. The third will be the basic structure of religious ideas. The fourth will be on junk food and pornography. If you understand the psychology of junk food and pornography, you will understand the psychology of religion. The fifth course is about attachment. And the attachment mechanism may be the foundational cognitive mechanism that we have that forms the basis of religion. Then we will talk for the sixth serving of something called decoupled cognition, which is what allows us to imagine souls, imagine an afterlife. Then the seventh thing will be something called, the seventh serving will be hyperactive agency detection mechanisms and minimally counterintuitive worlds. And again, these are psychological mechanisms that we all carry and utilize in our everyday life that go into religious belief. The eighth serving will be something called theory of mind. And basically that is, you can think about what other people are thinking, what their beliefs, wishes, and desires may be. The ninth will be what led to the spread of religion. And the 10th and final piece will be on ritual and the neurobiology of ritual, and the case that all religions that we see today, every religion you see today, has echoes in it of the original religion in our hunter-gatherer ancestors in Africa, the fundamental structure of which is song, dance, and trance. So that's the menu. Again, thank you. Buckle up, here we go. So this is the traditional view of Darwinian natural selection. that it operates at the level of the individual. And this cartoon illustrates it, but it's actually wrong. Darwinian natural selection operates at the level of the individual gene of the, and if you think about it, the double helix, DNA, the gene, is the fundamental unit of life. So that is where Darwinian natural selection is going to operate, at the level of the gene. And I love this poem by Les Murray, Life's Slim Volume Spirally Bound. And this is the best statement of the modern Darwinian synthesis. An organism is an integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations, shaped by natural selection over evolutionary time to promote, in some specific way, the survival of the genes that directed their construction. So, my heart solves the problem of pumping blood. Hemoglobin solves the problem of transporting oxygen. My lungs solve the problem of extracting oxygen from the air. At every single level of biological inquiry, Darwinian natural selection. Now, the other thing that's important about this statement is that this is also a statement about the human mind. The mind is what the brain does. And the mind-brain is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations, shaped by natural selection over evolutionary time to promote, in some specific way, the survival of the genes that directed their construction. So you're looking at me, I'm an upside-down two-dimensional image on your retina. All kinds of adaptations turn that into the three-dimensional sensation you have of vision. What we're going to be talking about are social adaptations, attachment, theory of mind, hyperactive agency detection. Those are also problem-solving devices that evolved and are part of the human mind, and they're the parts that go into religious belief. Now, this is another statement of the modern Darwinian synthesis. It says, well, my psychiatrist says, if it makes you happy, do it. And what this illustrates, a couple of things. Our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors are designed by our genes for our genes' benefit, not necessarily our own, okay? There is at times conflict between genetic interest and self-interest, and this illustrates it. The modern Darwinian synthesis helps us understand suicide. Suicide is an illustration of the modern Darwinian synthesis. If I kill myself and it augments the survival and reproduction of other bodies out there, like my children and grandchildren that contain my genes, there's going to be selection for suicide, which is not in my self-interest, but is in my genetic interest. And one of the characteristics of human beings is we are intensely social and make huge self-sacrifices for other people, particularly family. And sometimes we make an ultimate self-sacrifice with our own death. Steve Pinker has a nice analogy. The mind is like the mind-brain is like the Apollo spacecraft. What's the Apollo spacecraft? It's this compact array of engineering devices that are solving a constant stream of problems, only some of which actually become conscious to the astronauts. And many of the social adaptations that we have don't operate at the level of consciousness, but impact our behavior. All right, so that's the modern Darwinian synthesis. Let's turn to the second serving, human evolution. The basic here is that we are risen apes, not fallen angels. We are all African apes, and that's really hard for human narcissism to wrap its head around. Right? And Darwin knew this when he published Origin of the Species. I mean, he had a sense that human beings arose from apes in Africa. He waited until 1870 to publish it. It's really hard to get one's mind around the time sequences here. So let me give you a thought experiment that helps illustrate this. Right? Imagine that today, the 24 hours of today, is 2.4 million years. In other words, every hour is 100,000 years. So at midnight last night, 2.4 million years ago, our genus Homo shows up in Africa, right? It's about breakfast time this morning. Some of them left Africa. It is not until lunchtime that some made it into what is present day Europe. It's not until dinner tonight, 6 o'clock, that our immediate ancestor, Homo heidelbergensis, shows up in Africa. It's not around 9 o'clock, Neanderthals show up in Europe. Somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock, our species shows up, Homo sapiens. But it is not until, and we almost went extinct, by the way. Homo almost went extinct about 5 times. That's the current thinking. It is not until like 11:20 tonight, 70,000 years ago, that fully modern Homo sapiens is there. You and I, right? 70,000 years ago, and there was a huge climate bottleneck, and we may have gotten down to somewhere between 600 and 2,000 breeding individuals, but we made it through that climate bottleneck and survived. And it's not until 6 minutes before midnight, 6 minutes before midnight, that some of us started to settle down into agricultural communities in what is modern day Turkey, in the Near East. We started to settle down into some early agricultural communities, not to grow food, but actually to make better barley for better beer. But that's another story. The point of this is, I hope you see the vast length of time that our genus evolved in harsh, dangerous environments in a life of hunter-gatherers. That's the context in which all of these mechanisms evolved that I'm going to be talking about today. Not all, some are even earlier than Homo. But these are the mechanisms that helped our ancestors survive, and they had to try to figure out and come up with explanations for disease, storms, floods, fires, food shortages, water shortages. And it's very easy to explain those things by invoking human-like agents. And that probably actually had survival value. So it's important to keep in mind that the evolutionary past frames the experienced present. Or as William Faulkner said, the past is never dead, it's not even past. Right? So when you go to your physician and they ask for your family history, show them this. These are your ancestors, your Homo ancestors going back 2.4 million years. The skull on your left is Homo erectus, about 900 cubic centimeters. It was probably 1.5 million years old. The skull on your right is us, Homo sapiens, about 1,400 cubic centimeters. What I want you to look at is notice the difference in the frontal areas of the brain, the frontal lobe. That's what makes us human. We had conquered, as a genus Homo, we had conquered the physical environment. You know, we left Africa 1.5 million years ago. We'd conquered the physical environment. So what was the most challenging, difficult part of our environment that led to the rapid evolution of Homo sapien brains, particularly the frontal lobes? The most challenging part of the environment was each other. And we are a social animal. Your frontal lobe is a social brain. We're an ultra cooperative, ultra social species, and that all those mechanisms are largely in the frontal lobes. That's what makes us unique. And as you know, we got into Europe, maybe 100,000 years ago, and then we spread throughout the world, and we are the last surviving hominid. Neanderthals went extinct 25, 45,000 years ago. We're the last surviving hominid. And one of the questions is why? Why are we the last surviving hominid? And one of the reasons may be is that we achieved or evolved what the insects have. And that's something called eusociality. And eusociality is multi-generational care of the young, cooperative care of the young, what's called cooperative breeding. I'll gladly let you hold my one-year-old granddaughter. a chimpanzee mother won't even let her sister hold her child, right? So we have cooperative care of the young, cooperative breeding. We have division of labor. Think of all the different jobs all the people attending this afternoon do. We defend our homes. We defend local communes, local homes, local territories. And what's crucial about eusociality, any species that is eusocial has altruistic self-sacrifice. We sacrifice ourselves for others, and sometimes that can get derailed, and the sacrifice is suicide. Non-eusocial species do not have altruistic self-sacrifice. And again, we're altruistic, ultra cooperative, ultra social species, and the mechanisms that go into that, as I'll show you, are some of the mechanisms that go into generating supernatural beliefs. So again, you want to keep in mind that the context of our evolution is an endless camping trip with close relatives, right? That's the situation in which we evolved. And I think the other thing that's important politically, socially, is we just put aside your racial, ethnic, religious differences, right? Underneath our skins, we are all Africans. We are all African apes. We are all Africans. All 8 billion people on the earth today are the descendants of a small band of hunter-gatherers, several bands of hunter-gatherers that survived severe climate change in Africa 70,000 years ago, got through it, and survived and ultimately populated the world. So, we're on to the third serving. What's the fundamental structure of religious ideas? All religious ideas are byproducts of cognitive mechanisms that originally evolved for other purposes. They are all an artifact of our ability to imagine social worlds. Now, imagine social worlds sounds like a fancy phrase. It's not. All this is your ability right now while you're listening to me. You can think about conversations you're going to have with people later today, tomorrow, next week. You can imagine that in your head instantly. Complicated social interactions with other people. We have that ability, and that goes into religious beliefs. All religious ideas, all religious beliefs are human concepts with slight alterations. And this is not new, right? We keep, in some sense, rediscovering the same things. The great English poet Shelley, when he was refuting the idea of deism, he said there's no attribute of God which is not either borrowed from the passions and powers of the human mind, or which is not a negation of those powers. He saw that all religious ideas are based on attributes of human minds. So, another way of thinking of religious ideas is that they, as crazy as they are, be careful about thinking of our ancestors' religious beliefs as nuts, because they're not. They were useful falsehoods. They helped our ancestors for millions of years, explained a world, allowing them to have theories that were simple, that orderly, regular, that helped them survive and understand a complex world that was driven by invisible forces. Right? Most of the forces they were up against ultimately were unknown to them. And we're still, if you step back from it and think about it, we're still in that position ourselves. Have any of you here ever seen a gene? Have you ever seen an electron? Have you ever seen, say, the COVID virus? Yet we talk about them as if, the physicists will say, well, electrons have preferences. We will talk about genes do this, genes do that, as if they're like they've got human agency. So you can even catch in the modern world, in our language and in our thinking, some of these attempts to add simple agency to invisible forces which impact our life. Right. So that's the third serving. What's the fourth? This offends a lot of people, and I'm sorry, but it is true. If you understand the psychology of junk food, you understand the psychology of religion. Now, what is junk food? Junk food is a modern cultural creation that creates supernormal stimuli that lands on adaptions we have for something else. All of us here love sweets. We crave sugar. That original craving is for ripe fruit. Ripe fruit was a crucial source of calories. It was a crucial source of vitamin C. We didn't make our own vitamin C. So we all have cravings for that which was rare and crucial. Sweets. What does the modern world give us? It gives us Coca-Cola. It gives us brownies. And I don't know about you, but if I wake up in the middle of the night and there's a peach downstairs and there's a brownie, I may think I should be good and mind my, healthcare and eat the peach, but I'm going to find some excuse to eat the brownie. And meat, we all crave fat, but the fat that we crave was the fat of lean game meat, right? Which was rare, crucial source of calories and protein. And so we have cravings for fat, but the modern world gives it to us in a novel form of, fat-soaked McDonald's hamburgers. The other thing is that in the world in which we evolved, starvation was always right around the corner. We didn't eat just for the fuel we needed for that day. We ate as much as we possibly could because we might not see another meal for days or weeks. The modern world gives us plenty of food every single day, yet we have an appetite that's based on near starvation. And this underlies obesity, diabetes, but I hope you start to see that what's coming at us culturally is a novel, supernormal stimulus, right? My pleasure centers in my brain are going to respond a little bit to that peach, but to that brownie, boom. I mean, the pleasure centers in my brain, the nucleus accumbens, is just going to explode, right? And somebody sent me this picture, and I can't not include it. I'm sorry. The junk food Pope. Okay, so that's junk food, and I hope you see the structure of it. What about pornography? Pornography is the same thing. Pornography gives men basically. Pornography gives men supernormal stimuli. Women that want to jump on you, and you don't even have to ask them out for a date, right? And it's constant. And so we get intense, supernormal stimuli on our sexual predispositions, which were designed in a completely different environment. And I don't need to tell probably anyone in this audience that the terrible damage that the widespread availability of pornography is doing. But I hope you see the basic structure of it, taking evolved tendencies and hitting them hard with intense supernormal stimuli that did not exist in the ancestral environment. This brings us to religion, okay? And the same idea, hijacking ancient mechanisms with supernormal stimuli. This is obviously a church service, a Pentecostal church service. And what are the people doing? They're reaching up, right? They're reaching up to God. And what is if you've ever been around toddlers, what do toddlers do? They sort of, come over to you and they reach up and ask to be picked up. That's the basic mammalian human attachment system, right, that we all have. And religions are hijacking this with supernormal stimuli, a super father, a super mother, whose powers are much greater than the limited powers of our parents. And the human attachment system was mapped out by Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby. Mary Ainsworth was a psychologist, an American psychologist, John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist. And I would encourage you to look up On Becoming Attached, which is in the Atlantic Monthly. And if you can't find any of these things, don't hesitate to email me. I'll happily send you the references. But this was Robert Caron did an article on the attachment system in the Atlantic Monthly in 1990. and Bowlby and Ainsworth were still alive, and it's a great introduction to the attachment system. The other great introduction that's out there is written by a woman, Bethany Saltman. It's called The Strange Situation, and it's an absolutely beautiful book. She's a poet, and when her daughter was born, she became anxious about her relationship with her daughter. She did a 10-year deep dive into attachment theory, and she writes this book that is simultaneously her struggles about motherhood and educating you about the attachment system from Bowlby, Ainsworth in the beginning all the way to the modern day. And it's just a phenomenal book, I think. And this is the attachment system. And it's not just us, it's all mammals and primates. This is probably 60 million years old. And think about it. If you step back from it, when an infant primate is born, they instantly look for and connect to the mother and hold on for dear life. That's very complicated behavior. And we have these we're born with sort of innate neural networks that are in effect a form of knowledge. We're born with the knowledge that mothers exist. We're born with the knowledge that mothers know how to help. We're born with the knowledge that mothers are able to and want to and will help, particularly when we are crying. This is infantile, early childhood attachment networks in our brain. And what's the echo in religion? Mothers exist, the certainty of faith. Mothers know how to help, omniscient gods. Mothers are able to and want to and will help, our omnipotent gods. And mothers will respond when they hear crying. You know, gods will answer our prayers. The Virgin Mary will answer your prayer. If you are around an infant up to a few months old, take that infant and just momentarily just drop your hands out of, don't drop the baby, but just drop a little bit, and you'll see the child do a Moro reflex, and that's the attachment system. Or if you're around an infant, who's not mature, barely has their eyes open, and you put your finger in their hand, they're going to grasp it. That's the attachment system. And that we know that we're born with the idea that mothers nourish. They have a face and a melodic voice. If you've had children, think about how, whether you like to or not, particularly the mothers, but also the fathers, we start speaking to our infants in motherese. Our voice changes, right? That's hardwired. That's the attachment system. And that these circuits persist into adulthood. All of us right now, I have it, you all have it, we still have, in our heads, these infantile, these early childhood, neonatal attachment systems, which can still very easily get triggered. And, they, like pornography, okay, they can get triggered by super normal stimuli. And that they form the basis of all relationships, not just the mother-infant caretaking relationship, but friendships, colleagueships, romantic partners. The basis of this is all the attachment system, and it's a continuum. And the very early part is this neonatal early infant attachment system, which sits there dormant, but can be tapped into and create the illusion. I mean, these are powerful circuits, and they can create the illusion of a loving presence, particularly when we feel helpless and powerless and under huge stress. And how many of you know people who talk about finding God, but they found God when they were in enormously stressful situations? Now, if you're interested in this, I think one of the best, I'm obviously biased towards my little book on religion, but I think one you want to, if you've only got one book in you, John Wathay, a neuroscientist, wrote the book, The Illusion of God's Presence. It was published, I think, in 2016. And he lays this out marvelously. I think it's a contribution to the science of religion that hasn't gotten the recognition it deserves. He has a new book on, it's called, I'm blocking on the name now, but it's about more about the neuroscience. of religion. But his first book will, educate you like no other. So I hope so. And I think this is the basic fundament. This is one of the crucial, if not the most crucial, psychological mechanism that we all carry that religions hijack. Think about if you had a child and you rocked that child. You're rocking that child, stimulating their vestibular system, which again is part of the attachment system. It soothes the baby, and the baby generally is laying on your chest, and on the left side of your chest, if you think about it, if you've had children, had babies, that left side of your chest, they're hearing your heartbeat, and they're rocking, their vestibular system is being stimulated, and it's again part of the attachment system. What do men do at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem? They're davening, this rhythmic movement. It's like they're stimulating their vestibular system as they're chanting. And again, they are intensely stimulating their attachment system. What about communion? What is communion? Communion is an authority, a parent feeding a child. And here you see the child being fed. What do we do when we take communion? We go up and we kneel, so we get down into the position of a child. The parent is above us, we're a child, and we are fed like we can't feed ourselves. And that again is stimulating that early powerful attachment system. All right. Some of you may have seen some of the coronation of King Charles, and we'll come back to some of this, but I choose it because it illustrates a lot of things about ritual and the functions of ritual. But I want you to look at what surrounds Charles here. Notice it is mostly children, right? And it again is stimulating at some unconscious level your attachment system. Who makes up the choir? Oh, and this basically, if you watched any of it or read about it, it was basically a medieval religious service. And it's a very rich example of much that I want to go over with you today. Notice what surrounds Charles. It's children. Who was the choir that was singing to him? It was a children's choir. Think about the music. Think about all your Christian hymns. They evoke the attachment system. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a poor wretch like me. Once I was lost, now I'm found, right? It was grace. Look at the words of almost all Christian hymns will at some level evoke the attachment system. I mean, obviously there's a few like Onward Christian Soldiers that have to do with war. We'll get back to that. But I challenge you, think of your favorite Christian hymns. Swing low, sweet chariot, come and 40, carry me home, right? Look at the lyrics. They're all about the attachment system. And there was a gospel group at the coronation. And I would encourage you, pull up the video of them singing, because what you will see is that they sing a hymn that has to do with basically praising a parent, a benevolent parent. It's the attachment system right there before you. And we'll come back to it later, but you will see that they're making beautiful music, they are singing, but they are moving, and they are moving symmetrically. And we'll come back to that in ritual. But again, at the heart of this is the early attachment system. Go to Scripture, and once you get out of the slaughter and mayhem of the Old Testament, and even still some of it is in the Old Testament, a lot of your Scripture is again going to evoke the attachment system. This is from Psalm 27. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. And I chose this picture deliberately because, again, it is a old, ancient mammalian system. The elephants have it just like we do. All right, so that's the attachment system. Number 6, fancy name, decoupled cognition. And what this means is that we can decouple our cognition in time and place and mind and body. Time and place is what I was talking about earlier, which is right now, you're in Atlanta, and while you're listening to me, you can think about a conversation you might have with somebody who's in South Carolina. You can in next week. So you can move to a different place, a different time, and have a complicated social interaction with an unseen other in a different place in a different time. We take it for granted. It's part of our everyday, ordinary cognition. I can right now think about a patient I'm going to have to see on Monday that I'm kind of worried about, right? So that's time and place. We also decouple our cognition in mind and body. And this goes to how we can conceive of souls. This is an ancient burial in what is today Israel. It's an adolescent male, and this is all over the anthropologic record. And a set of antler horns were put in his grave. They clearly thought he would have some form of afterlife, and they put all sorts of things in his grave for him to have in the afterlife. If you think about it, what is Egyptian civilization? Egyptian civilization is this extraordinarily complex civilization built on the idea of an afterlife. How could we have the psychology of an afterlife? And again, it's very easy. And one of the things I hope you're starting to see is religious cognition is just one step from everyday, ordinary cognition. So I'm going to do it. I hope you can see it, but I'm going to hold up this apple here, and I want you to imagine that this is my brain, right? This is my brain, and so we're going to cut my brain in half, right? And this is the front of my brain right here. This is the back of my brain, and this is the midline structures of my brain. And it's in the midline that I can, this is where my own thoughts, my own feelings are processed, in the midline. When I think about what you're thinking, that's in the midline. Okay. Now, if you were standing in front of me and I looked at your left arm, that's going to be processed on the outer cortex, right? If I'm looking at your left arm, I'm going to process that on my right cortex. And so I hope you see there's a split between mind and body that's built into our brains. And this allows us all sorts of things that we take for granted, but it's actually extraordinary cognition, right? And it's what underlies what's called dualism, which is our brains represent minds and bodies in completely separate neural circuits. We experience and believe that minds and bodies are separate categories, even though we know differently. We know the mind is what the brain does, but I think that I have a body. I don't think I'm in a body. I have a body and I have a mind. And I view you all as having minds and bodies, but they're separate. What's the advantage of this? It's huge. If I had to have Bobby in front of me, where I could see him, to think about what he might want or what his preferences are or what he might want for this talk, that would be a real burden. I can think about him and his mind even before meeting him. And once meeting him, I can still think about, well, what does he, want for this talk today? What does his audience want? And so the belief in some form of life, mental life, that is apart and different from the body, that's just a default setting of the human brain. It's just automatic. We experience mind and bodies differently, and this allows for the idea of souls, which are basically bodiless minds that are out there, right? But we do that all the time. All the time. We can think about having a conversation with President Biden, I've never met him, but I can think about a conversation that I might like to have with him, right? And it's automatic. Now, I would wager you that nobody, when I said in the beginning of my lecture, when I said, if you ran into Mr. Jefferson next week, I'm confident that none of the people in this audience went, what's he talking about? Run into Mr. Jefferson next week? I can't run into Mr. Jefferson. It's automatic. You can think about running into Mr. Jefferson and having a conversation with him, even though Jefferson is long dead, right? You can see, I hope, that that's just one little step with interacting with ancestors. We're not that many steps away from ancestor worship, right? And I'm at UVA, where until recently Mr. Jefferson was a god and was worshipped, but that's another story. That was the sixth serving. So that's decoupled cognition. Number 7, hyperactive agency detection mechanisms, and this is crucial. Right now, wherever you are, if you heard a door slam, you would bolt. Your body would start to pour out adrenaline. Your body would get ready for fight flight, and you would act as if it's a human agent long before you would think it was the wind. And that's crucial, absolutely crucial, because a false positive, meaning that it wasn't a human being, a false positive is an inconvenience. You start to sweat a little bit, and you got distracted, but you quiet your body down and you go back to business as usual. Now, if that door slammed and you thought it was just the wind, no big deal, but it was actually a predator, a tiger or another human being, that's a false negative, and that's deadly. So we have inconvenience on one hand, deadly on the other. So our brains, because the consequences of a false negative are so severe, our brains evolved to be hyperactive agency detection. We see faces in the clouds. If there's something sudden or surprising, we're going to assume it's human until proven otherwise. You hear something downstairs in the middle of the night, you're going to think burglar long before you think it's a cat. Now, there's another thing that's connected to this, called minimally counterintuitive worlds. And this is a real crucial part of religion. I'm not familiar with Atlanta, but let's say there's a park in Atlanta that's got a famous old oak tree that's in the middle of the park, well-known, famous old oak tree in Atlanta. And if I tell you that Atlanta oak will fix your computer, do your taxes, take your car to get fixed, you are simply not going to believe me. I hope not, because there are too many violations of treeness. There's just way too many violations of treeness. But if I tell you that old oak in Atlanta, on the night of full moons, will hear your requests, you're going to be, even this audience, you're going to be a little bit vulnerable to get drawn into that. And the structure of that is there are almost no violations of treeness. There's just one little twist, which is a human twist, that tree will hear my prayers, can understand my Southern accented English, and can hear my prayers. Just has coupled human attributes, but no big violations of treeness. And these are called minimally counterintuitive worlds. And they're sort of the optimum compromise between the interesting and the expected. And they're always attention arresting and memorable. You're more likely to remember the tree that'll hear your wish. You'll remember that longer than the tree. You won't remember all the things I said the tree could do in terms of your taxes and car. But you'll remember that can hear your prayer for a little bit longer time. Right? What's the Virgin Mary? Right? The Virgin Mary, right, is basically, there are no violations of a young woman and baby, right? the attachment system. All right. A young woman and a baby, as human as it gets, there's one little twist. She didn't have to go through the usual prerequisites to have a child. She's a virgin, right? But it also indirectly hints at, well, maybe she, conceived of the child with God, but it was an immaculate conception, so we can't charge the guy with rape. But you can, I think, start to see that it is a beautiful illustration of a minimally counterintuitive world. Almost no violations of young woman, child, kindness, and one little twist, she had an immaculate conception and had Jesus. And she's powerful. The Catholic Church has made her a deity. We pray to her, but she's a nice example of a minimally counterintuitive world. And the religious minimally counterintuitive worlds hijack this system that we have: hyperactive agency, our evolved expectations of the world, and what was crucial for survival, which is fitness. Fitness is survival and reproductive success. Survival requires that we pick up very quickly anomalies in our environment, because they could be deadly, and control of them may have been, was crucial for our survival. And how do they get forged into religion? Well, these minimally counterintuitive intentional agents become the Virgin Mary. They possess strategic information. The Judeo-Christian God is another big example of a minimally counterintuitive world. I mean, what is the Judeo-Christian God? He's an angry old man, right? And there are very few violations of angry old men. But he's got strategic information about me. He knows whether I've been naughty or nice. He interacts with the world. And I think one of the interesting things is, okay, he knows what I think and feel, but if he knows what I think and feel, why do I have to pray to him? That doesn't make any sense. But again, my having to pray to him keeps there from not being too many violations of humanness, right? And also, these minimally counterintuitive, powerful agents like God and the Virgin Mary motivate ritual. And these go into religion, rituals, costly devotions, fasting, prayers, taboos. And again, these are all going to be virtue signaling to show that I'm a loyal member of a group. I'm loyal to the God, but I'm also a loyal member of the group, of the whatever religious sect I'm a member of. And again, religion, the root word of religion is religare, which means to bind, social bonding, right? And we build credibly enhancing displays like monuments, cathedrals, churches, which are awe-inspiring and again, testaments to the commitment of our tribe to whatever religion we're part of. All right, so that's MCIs. The eighth serving on today's tapas menu is theory of mind. And again, this is just a fancy term for we can think about what other people believe, wish, and desire. And we can pick up signs in their face, in their emotions, in their eye gaze. There are all sorts of things that we use as cues, but we can spend a lot of time, as you know, thinking about what other people think, desire, believe, and want. Theory of mind. And there are a couple of, don't pay attention to the details here. Let me just go over it. There are two really fascinating imaging studies. One in 2009, actually done at NIH, Kapagiannis and his colleagues. And they took people and put them in scanning machines. And when people were thinking about God's feelings, when they were thinking about God's intentions, when they were thinking about religious scripture, the parts of their brain that lit up were those theory of mind mechanisms. I would submit to you, it's a very important paper because they showed that religious cognition was just utilizing everyday, ordinary mechanisms that we evolved to deal as social animals. Now, these images come from another paper by Epley and his colleagues, and this was interesting in that they took people and had them, they manipulated their beliefs, and what was fascinating is when they manipulated the person's belief, lo and behold, the person believed that God had changed his opinion in the similar direction. So it's a nice imaging study that shows that a person's religious beliefs are just projected onto whatever God they worship. And the lower right shows that God and the self were the same. When we think about somebody else's religious beliefs, we use slightly different mechanisms. But if we're thinking about our own beliefs and God's beliefs, they're basically unitary in our minds. And it's a wonderful paper. That's, again, hoping to show you that religious beliefs based on everyday, ordinary, evolved cognitive mechanisms, in this case, theory of mind. So how do religions spread? And they spread by a number of mechanisms. And these are the Kung San in Africa, who I'll come back to. And religions spread to the extent that they can facilitate further cooperation. And remember, we evolved to be ultra social, ultra cooperative species. So we're already heavily biased in that direction. So any religion that can facilitate in-group cooperativeness is going to have a head start. Also, they spread religions spread to the extent that they can reduce the limitations that kinship and reciprocity-based altruism relationships are in a group. So, I can join a religion or religious sect even if I'm not an actual brother or kin to somebody in the group. I can join a religion and become part of the religion even if I'm not in a reciprocity-based relationship with somebody where I'm scratching their back, they're scratching mine. I can still be a part of that and become part of the wider religion without those limitations. I ultimately may obviously, develop some reciprocity-based, help people, they help me, but the initial spread does not require that. Right? And once I'm in the religion, I'm going to often be referred to as brother or sister. Again, trying to evoke kin, trying to evoke which are the strongest relationships, trying to evoke kin, trying to evoke attachment relationships. Right. And they're going to also utilize our sensitivity to our pro-social reputation. All of us want to be thought of, or most all of us want to be thought of as pro-social, as cooperators, as good people who will sacrifice for others. Religions, again, hijack that, right? Religions also use moralizing and monitoring gods to facilitate cooperation. One aspect of being human is that if people are watching us, we're on better behavior. I don't know if you know the experiment where they put a coffee thing in an office, and you come up and you get a cup of coffee, and you're supposed to put some money in a cup. And if they put just 2 sets of plastic eyes above the coffee machine, the amount of money in the bowl increases. If you feel you're being watched, you behave a little bit better. And one of the main functions of gods is as monitors and moralizing monitors. All right, so back to the Kung San. And something that is very important, I think, to understanding religions in our world and rituals. If you look at the Kung San in Africa, and the Andaman Islanders off the coast of India, they were an isolated population until the 18th century. I think actually until the 19th century. And then you look at the Aborigines, they all have almost identical religions based on song, dance, and trance. And Nicholas Wade powerfully argues that that is a window into deep history. That's a window into the original religion of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and echoes of those religions, I'll show you, are to be found in all modern day religions. So the Kung San of Africa. And religions, I love this, is from Jonathan Haidt. Religions work to suppress our inner chimp, our selfishness, not putting the money in the coffee bowl, suppress our selfishness, our inner chimp, and bring out our inner bee. What's the bee? The eusocial animal, ultra cooperative, ultra social. Right? The Andaman Islanders, the Aborigines, all three religions based on song, dance, and trance. No priests, no ecclesiastical hierarchy. So one function of religion in those hunter-gatherer groups were inevitably a hierarchical species, and we sort of tamp that down in the original religion. There's a greater equality. It's the whole community, and distinctions of rank are suppressed. And it's centered on rhythmic physical activity. Now, why? Because our ancestors literally stumbled into a way to harness our neurobiology in very, very powerful ways. All of you have heard of serotonin. That's the neurotransmitter that Prozac boosts. Serotonin is one of the oldest monoamine neurotransmitters, and it's crucial for self-esteem. You boost serotonin, you get a rise in self-esteem. If tomorrow we made Bobby president of the United States, even if he didn't want the job, if we made him president, his serotonin levels would go up. The status, the improved status, his serotonin system would be exploding, and his self-esteem would go up simply because he was catapulted on status, right? So serotonin boosts self-esteem. Norepinephrine and dopamine, adrenaline and dopamine. We tend to think of these as, like dopamine, the pleasure chemical, but norepinephrine and dopamine are crucial for memory, attention, and focus. They mark things as memorable. When something really stands out in your memory, it has been marked with dopamine and norepinephrine. All of you've heard of oxytocin, the trust hormone, right? So again, these rituals boost oxytocin. Endorphins, our own internal morphine system, which diminishes pain. But most people don't appreciate that endorphins boost bonding. Endorphins are a crucial bonding hormone. Right? And Darwin, again, Darwin saw this. He saw that musical notes and rhythm, first acquired by the male or female of mankind for the sake of charming the opposite sex. Music is crucial for courtship, as everybody knows. Musical tones become firmly associated with the strongest passions an animal is capable of feeling. Love, attachment, commitment, cooperation, bonding. Right, now, if we, this is a beautiful experiment. If we take Bobby and we put him on a rowing machine, and we have Bobby row for a few minutes on the rowing machine, and they've, you can measure work output, so we know exactly what his work output is on the rowing machine. And then we take Bobby and we put a blood pressure cuff on, and we squeeze it until he feels pain, right? And we measure his pain threshold. Now we put Bobby back on the rowing machine, but this time he's got two people on either side of him rowing synchronously with Bobby, right? And they do the same work output, exact same work output. Now we test Bobby's pain threshold, and it's gone way up. It takes a lot more squeezes on the blood pressure cuff to get close to that pain. Same work output, but he is moving symmetrically with other people, right? He's moving in rhythm, and we have changed his endorphin level, right? Touch is very, very powerful. And I don't know really any of the women in the audience, but I'll assume somebody's out there who will be a volunteer. And
All right, who you want?
I'm sorry?
You want me to bring somebody up?
No, they don't have to come up. Just give me a name.
Miss Tiffany.
Tiffany, okay. That's right. She was on the email. All right. Tiffany, okay. So we're going to put Tiffany in an imaging machine, right? And she's lying there in an imaging machine, and she's shown a threat scenario. And her amygdala, the fear center of her brain, just explodes, right? Okay, then we have Tiffany hold the hand of a stranger, and we show her the threat scenario again, and her amygdala still lights up, but it doesn't light up anywhere near as much. And she's holding the hand of a stranger. Then the third thing is that we have Tiffany in the imaging machine, and we have her hold the hand of somebody she knows, a close friend, a romantic partner, but somebody she knows, and she's holding the hand of that individual. We show the threat scenario again, and her amygdala barely lights up. Even more interesting, the degree to which Tiffany's amygdala does not light up is proportional to her ratings of the relationship. So the more she rates it as a close, good relationship, the less her amygdala lights up. And the only variable here is holding a hand, right? Touch, that's it. Touch is very, very powerful. And when we wanted touch, let me be clear, it is wanted touch. So if you come up to a loved one, to a friend, and you just put your hand on their shoulder and give it a little bit of a squeeze, they're going to get a hit of endorphins and oxytocin, and the idle speed of their frontal lobe will come down a little bit. Touch is much more powerful than we ever appreciated. Now, I don't know how many of you saw in 2012 when Barack Obama was nominated to run for his second term. And at the Democratic National Convention, Bill Clinton gave just an unbelievable nominating speech for President Obama. What most people did not realize is that these two men hated each other. Absolutely hated each other. And it was like the Mideast peace negotiations getting these two men back together. And they managed to find a truce. It was a tense truce, but it was a truce. So Clinton gives this fantastic speech. Then he comes off the podium. And as he comes off the podium, out from behind the curtain comes Obama. And the crowd obviously just goes wild. And these two men hug each other. And Obama is not just hugging him, but he is stroking Clinton's back like there's no tomorrow. And you see a tear out of Clinton's left eye. And what these men didn't know is that this was a powerful moment of conciliation through touch. Through touch. I mean, it was incredibly powerful. Oh, the other thing is that when he came off the podium, Clinton bowed to Obama. He made a symbolic gesture of submission to Obama. I mean, it's extraordinary. And I don't know if any of you happened to be watching, but it was very powerful. I was crying. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I didn't know these guys hated each other. I mean, it was just powerful in its own right. It was just, I thought, quite extraordinary. And why was I crying? Because I have mirror neurons. So my brain was reacting as if Obama was hugging me, right? At some level, we have these mirror neurons that pick up on what's going on in others and lights up the same part of our brain. If you go into the anthropologic record, and what are cave paintings? When they're human beings, they're dancing. They're always groups, they're often touching, and there's some form of dancing. Now, we get back to the coronation for a minute, right? And the purpose of rituals. And you notice that Charles has representatives of all these religions in front of him. No religion ever survived by tolerating their competitors. And I don't know if the members of the other religions appreciated it, but this was a ritual in which they are basically submitting to Charles, right? And to his group. And rituals, again, are powerful because they resolve multiple social issues. And this is going to be true of even the secular rituals that we do. The wave at a football stadium. And they solve a number of rituals. They solve freeloaders, okay? Somebody who's selfish, if you participate in a ritual, and particularly a religious ritual, it is a hard to fake, costly, honest signal of commitment to the group. Rituals, there's a lot of ritual often involved in punishment or symbolic punishment. Rituals are a place for commitment. Rituals are also a place for courtship. I don't know about any of the members, in the audience, but when I went to Bible camps and stuff when I was a kid and a teenager, I mean, a lot of that was courtship. I was looking at the women and hoping, it was that was part of it. And if you remember that Kung San, if you notice, the men are circling the women, okay, and the women are assessing them, assessing their commitment to the group, assessing their appearance. It is a very powerful part of courtship within a group. Obviously, rituals ease communal conflict. And that ritual at the Democratic National Convention obviously eased the conflict between President Obama and former President Clinton. Rituals are involved in territorial defense. They also signal the quality and identity of a group. And think about what King Charles and the coronation ritual was trying to signal. We're wealthy, we're powerful, we're God's agent, the monarch, God's agent on earth. But rituals are also very powerful preparation for men going to war. Again, the coronation, look at it, it's full of soldiers, right? And I like this one. If you believe in me, divide into sex, and kill and hurt as many from the other sex as you possibly can, right? And again, these were the things that were involved in King Charles's coronation. And look closely, the majority of these instruments at his coronation were weapons, were swords. And even more interesting to me was that the head of Parliament, Penny Mordaunt, so she's head of Parliament. What is Parliament? It's a democratic institution. Democracies and monarchies do not mix, right? Democracies are based on one person, one vote, equality before the law. What are monarchies? Monarchies are unearned power and wealth, unearned power. And we have the head of Parliament, a democratic institution, basically arming King Charles. I mean, this was a medieval religious ritual in the extreme. All right. So let's finish up here, and we're going to go back to human evolution and a place in southeast Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, which was discovered in the 1990s. And the it used to be thought that we were hunter-gatherers, and then we settled down and invented religion and religious monuments and those kind of things. Göbekli Tepe turned it on its head. We were still hunter-gatherers, and we came together at Göbekli Tepe for religious rituals. And one of the things we did was we brewed beer, right? And these are vats where beer was brewed using wild barley. Why would they brew beer, right? And it's because alcohol stimulates those endorphin receptors. It stimulates those mu opioid receptors. When we drink alcohol, it stimulates our bonding hormones, particularly through the endorphin system. Right? And we may have settled into agricultural communities not to grow food, but to raise better barley for better beer. And the original bread was not for eating. The original bread, einkorn, was for storing barley to brew beer. And this, you can see, this is from Göbekli Tepe. You can see the statue, the carving of people dancing and touching. Oh, the other thing is, when we listen to music, we get a little bit of stimulation. If you sing, if you make music, you really stimulate your endorphin system, your bonding system. Think choirs, right? So when you see this kind of thing, when you see any religious ritual in the modern world, I want you to look closely, because they all contain those echoes of the original religions based on song, dance, and trance. And there's no music in Islam, but men come together in this symmetrical prayer movement, right? It's a dance. Look at this as a dance, and they're close together. There's a lot of touching. And if you've ever heard the chants of an imam, it's beautiful. There's not music, but there's this beautiful chanting. Again, you see, I hope you see the echoes of the original religion and its ability to, hijack these powerful chemicals in our brains and bodies used for bonding. Everybody thinks of Buddhists as, these old guys in crimson robes. This is a Buddhist ritual, the same thing. A lot of music, a lot of symmetrical movement, the same thing. Think of the men at the Wailing Wall. It's a dance, right? And they're chanting. It's a dance and they're chanting. They're close together. There's not direct touch, but they're bumping into each other. Think about your African American churches, the gospel services. And again, those gospels, the songs have to do with attachment. There are a lot often in gospel choirs. There's children, right? And again, go back to the coronation. The beautiful rendition of Hallelujah, swaying. They're basically dancing. They're not touching, but they're swaying. They're making music. And it's music about praising an attachment figure. Our Pentecostal service, again, a lot of dancing. Oh, the other thing, why are pews in churches, right? Pews were probably one of the reasons pews were put in churches in the 15th century. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 15th century and the 1400s. Pews were put in churches to stop the dancing. It was when political power, the throne, had more control over religion and was using it, and they wanted people to stop dancing, to sit in the pews and listen to the sermons. Because with the dancing, as you know, people want to get into ecstasy states. The original word for ecstasy is the Greek word for enthusiasm, and they want to communicate directly to God themselves. But with political power, they're trying to control the dancing and keep people from a little bit too much ecstasy and in line and submitting to the king, submitting to the monarch and power. But you can see the attachment behavior. All right. In finishing up, and I very much appreciate your attention, we're going to finish up with this cartoon about Dickens. And the man is saying to Dickens, I wish you could make up your mind, Mr. Dickens. Was it the best of times or was it the worst of times? It could scarcely have been both. And what I want you to consider is that Dickens in this cartoon was right. It is both the best of times and it's the worst of times. It's the worst of times in that all we got to do is turn on the television, open a newspaper, and we have evidence every day of how religion is poisoning so much of life on this planet. And it is one of the main barriers to secular civil societies. So and you just saw this mosque bombing in Pakistan, suicide terrorism still plagues us, religiously motivated suicide terrorism. So it is still the worst of times in many ways. But if I've done my work well, I hope I have shown you it is also the best of times. It is the best of times in that we are the first generation of human beings. We're the first generation in the history of the world to understand the basics of religious belief. We now understand the basics of why we generate religious beliefs, the mechanisms we use to generate religious beliefs, the mechanisms that make all of us vulnerable to these beliefs. And I think that leaves us with three crucial questions. First, what am I going to do with that knowledge? What am I going to do with that knowledge? The second question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? But the most important question is the third question. What are we, as scientifically literate, democratic societies in the 21st century, what are we going to do with this knowledge for future generations? Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for your attention.
Okay. Oh man, that was powerful. You was cooking with that hot grease right there. Appreciate that information, man. Yeah, the presentation was top notch, man. Appreciate that right there, man.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it's long, but I want you to have it.
It actually wasn't long, man. It was very intriguing, and the audience actually learned a lot, man. How much time you got for these questions?
5-6 hours.
Yeah, we gonna get it in. Yeah, it's time to get it in, man. Pseudo Killer style, man. Y'all know what it is, man. Hit that Cash App, man. Y'all know what it is, man. We bringing it like we supposed to, and like Andy said, man, we represent the first generation to actually understand why we believe what we believe, and so we part of something big. And I wanted to make sure that we had it here first, okay? So yeah, let me let everybody in, man. Let the Pseudo Killers in. They're in the building, man. I see we got some of the Pseudo Killer army in here. What's up, Joel? What's up?
Peace. Can you hear me
Christian,
okay?
non-Christian. He got Christian, non-Christian. Look, we're gonna give you, since you the Christian, non-Christian. You don't know if you're a Christian or you don't know. We're gonna give you the first stab at it, man. We appreciate you, man, always coming in. You're in the Pseudo Killer army, man. Go ahead and have that.
All right.
Dr. Andy, go ahead.
You can hear me okay?
I can hear you loud. I hear you loud and clear, man. You good. You crystal.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, Dr. Thomson, that was a powerful presentation. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
All right, so you see Unc called me the non-Christian, right?
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about the things that you just spoke about. That was pretty impactful for me. I'll have to go back, rewind the show, listen again, and try to take in some of the things that you were saying, because I'm working my way through this, and I'm somebody who's pretty instrumental in the congregation that I'm in, and so I have to be responsible as I talk to people. So I have to try to deliver things in a way that'll bring people along and not just crush them. You follow where I'm coming from?
Oh yeah, no, it's
Okay.
hard.
Okay,
You're not gonna argue anybody out of their belief.
Exactly. Right. They're gonna have to study their way out.
Yeah, you have to come to it on your own. You have to read and think about it away from other people.
Right. There you go. So here's my first question for you that popped in my head. Since our brains are greatly hardwired to imagination and religion, do you think there is a way to train the brain not to predict this way? And if yes, what would that process look like?
Yes, I think it's education, education, right? And I can give you an example. All of us talk about, the sun, rises in the east and it sets in the west, right? And intuitively we think that, the sun revolves around the earth, and the earth is flat. Um, just that's how we feel. But we know from Copernicus and Galileo that that's wrong. Our intuitions are wrong,
Right.
and science has corrected our intuition. And it's the same thing. It's just education. I think if we, my argument is that what I'm went through today should be in every psychology 101 textbook in introductory psychology in universities. The vast majority of, I think, there are 15 million, I think, college students right now, something like that. And I don't think you should be able to write an introductory psychology textbook that doesn't have this in it.
Okay.
And I think so. It's education, education, education. Another piece of it is Europe became very secular after World War II. I mean, the amount of religious belief in Europe really plummeted after World War II, long before this information was available. And a lot of people feel like it's because of the Marshall Plan and the social safety net that was built into European societies. And we don't have that social safety net in this country. What's the greatest provider of social services to women and children in this country? It's the Mormon Church, right? And so I think you ought to have education, 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 but I think you have to have a social safety net. I think that's part of it, because who are some of the most vulnerable people to religious belief? It's the poor, who are in helpless, powerless situations. That's why you see this terrible rise of Catholicism in Africa. I mean, it's awful, and that would be part of it. But I think I would address it on those two fronts: educational and political.
Okay. So when we look at education, do you think it's is it a dilemma that this would be something that would be like focused at the collegiate level? Like, okay, so when you think about like brain development and that kind of thing, I was listening to we're currently doing one of Lisa Barrett's books, and in her book she kind of talks about the development of the brain early,
yeah,
right, and how that shapes us when we get older.
Mm-hmm.
So is the collegiate level too late?
Yes,
is where I'm going. Like, so should this be something that is taught as I don't know the brain like you do, but at some point in grade school, early, like children being taught certain things that'll teach them that it's wrong to look at another person who looks phenotypically different than you as another race. You know, like they learn these things, and so they become better adults. Like, so I know I'm saying a lot. It's
look. No,
bottom line is collegiate level too late? Is the
no? Listen, thank you so much for your comment, because you actually corrected me, because there's a third level, which is exactly what you laid out. I think it's education, it's social safety net, but it is also children, and I would suggest looking at. And you might find this helpful for your congregation, is that I'm not sure they might be upset, but
not yet. I
Nicholas,
appreciate that, though.
no, but Nicholas Humphrey, who was a British psychologist, and he did a speech for Amnesty International back in 1996, and you can pull it up on the web. I think edge.org published it. It's just called What Shall We Tell the Children? Nicholas Humphrey. And he argues that every child has a fundamental human right to be protected from religious indoctrination. So he doesn't say that, he doesn't go quite this far, but that religious indoctrination is a form of child abuse, and because you're teaching children things that are simply not true. I mean, you're teaching them that the earth was created in 6 days. That you're just teaching them things that are fundamentally wrong. And that there should be a basic human right that children are protected from religious indoctrination. Right. If at age 25 they want to become religious, they absolutely have a right. Okay. But that it's child abuse. And I think it's a fantastic essay. And if you think about it, just to pick on one religious sect, if you've ever been around Hasidic Jews and seen the young boys that in the modern world have to wear these black hats, and they have the long black curls and the heavy coats and all this stuff. I mean, they're just marked out as different, and not just regular children of the 21st century.
Right. All right. One more question.
Joel,
no,
we're gonna pass it. We're gonna pass it around. Thank you.
She moved you out the way.
I know. Out of there.
Yeah, hold that though, Joe. Hold that. That's some good questions right there. And yeah, like we got a couple of pseudo killers like Cedric, man. He's been saying that for a while. And I was saying, but don't say it. You got to think it. Don't tell them that. But we're going to put it on you, Andy. You did that. You're right, though. We need to start educating the babies at young ages, because actually it's really indoctrination.
Yeah, no,
and you're right. And so
right. I very much appreciate the question, because I was missing that third level.
Boy, it took a Christian, non-Christian to do it. Boy, I tell you the world, I tell you. Hey, where you at, Marcus? Man, we got Marcus, and then we're gonna go with Brass. We're gonna get all the pseudo killer army in here. What's going on, Marcus? How you doing, man? Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Great show so far. Dr. Andy did a wonderful job. His book is wonderful. I'm just gonna ask the first question. Hopefully, we'll get around to the second one. You briefly talked about error management theory. About how people function that way. Can you give some examples where in real life examples for that?
Yeah, you bring up a very important concept, error management theory, that was largely developed by a woman who's now at UCLA, Marty Hazelton. And it's that the argument that human beings are irrational and have these cognitive glitches, she argues that that's wrong. That we make errors, but we are evolved to make errors, because not false positives could be deadly. Some error management, I'm trying to think of ones. Well, I mean, one of hers is that men overread women's sexual interest in them. Okay, men are biased to overread women's sexual interest. They make that error all the time, and her argument is that yes, that's true, but it's much better for the man and his chance at reproducing. It's much better that he overread a woman's sexual interest rather than underread it and miss an opportunity. And that's just one example from everyday life, where what looks like an error actually is an evolved bias that might have had reproductive consequences in ancestral environments. But if I'll send it to Bobby, but there's a new paper out and I cited it by Leitner and Hagen, and it's hard to read. It's very dense, but I think they answer your question better than anybody. They lay out the reasons that our ancestors would make errors trying to figure out invisible forces, and why those errors were advantageous to overread agency, because they were dealing with a world that was dangerous and full of invisible forces. And I'll send the paper. I've got Bobby's email, and and I think Tiffany's, and I'll send the paper. And just ahead of time, it's a dense paper, but it's really good. If you spend your time going through it, it really illuminates why our ancestors would have made what they call useful falsehoods. Better safe than sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I'll make a point. I'll make a point of sending that paper, and ahead of time. Just if you find it thick and hard to read, it is. But it's worth the effort to slowly go through it, because I think they lay it out better than anybody.
Oh yeah, we appreciate that material right there.
I'll send it, but
and you sent me some other sources. I'll make sure to actually share that with the Pseudo Killer Army. You got another question, Mark?
Yeah, but giving this, and I'm also Bobby's free to give my email out if you have suggestions, comments, or you know stuff that you think would help. I mean, let me know. I'm always want new information.
I got him. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Robert Sapolsky's work as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One of the issues with evolutionary psychology is that some within your community tends to run a little wild with it, and it leads to some social problems. And their argument is that if we give this information out, right, there's social implications and ramifications for it, right? So, like you spoke about religion, if we really remove religion from society, that's people's jobs, people, preachers, they make money. That's how they make their living, scamming. I mean, well, I'm sorry, not scamming, but
scamming.
Teaching stuff like that. One of his quotes is, when it comes to neuroscience, could help the wider public. The worst thing is when we make advances in, say, mindfulness, and then decide that everybody potentially thinks their way to curing themselves or develop their own psychoneural immune mechanisms for boosting cancer defense. So basically, his argument is people who argue about determinism, like telling people there's no free will, the ramifications are serious. So I would ask, have you considered that in some of your work, where you're saying this whole religion thing is just made up, or consequence of the mind evolutionary processes?
Well, let me take your things one at a time. I'm also a real fan of Sapolsky, and he's got a new book coming out in a couple of weeks on the absence of free will and determinism. I happen to think he's right, and it's not that scary, because if you really look at his argument, it's humility before the facts, that we all have to make decisions, but we don't have the unencumbered free will that we think we have, and I think it modifies things. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a couple examples, because I think it has bearing for healthcare. I just gave a talk on the absence of free will in healthcare, in mental health care. The concept of free will, part of that concept includes that if you've got free will, it means you could have done otherwise. Okay, if you've got free will, you could have taken another road, and I can illustrate it simply. All of you right now could leave this meeting. I hope you don't, but all of you right now could make the decision to leave this meeting and leave. But right now, you cannot go back and not come to this meeting. The decisions we made at that time were the only decisions we could have made. And what that means for healthcare is that your patient could not be other than they are at that moment. There's no call for getting angry at the guy who's still smoking, even though he's got emphysema, or the diabetic that's still eating candy bars. That person is that way because they couldn't be any other way at that moment. They can't go back and change their lives. They can't pick their genes. They can't pick their parents. They can't pick that their mother was starving when they were a fetus and it changed their metabolism. So I think Sapolsky's argument for no free will has huge implications for our having to be humble before the facts, our having to really redo the criminal justice system. And I think it has huge implications for healthcare and healthcare professionals. So I'm a big, I think Sapolsky's on the money with regards to his argument for free will, as opposed to, in terms of making ministers unemployed. You're right. I have a number of friends and I've had patients who were ministers who lost their faith, but they were in a terrible bind because they couldn't earn a living otherwise. Some of them tried and, they couldn't. And often their families are believers. And to openly become an atheist was to risk rupturing their families. And they go ahead and continue to have congregations, and it's very, very stressful for them. And that's why, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Clergy Project, but there was literally a project to help these ministers that have long since lost their faith. Let's see, your Sapolsky ministers, the third part of your question.
Have you considered the social implications?
The social, yeah. Well, look at, what the social implication. Look at again. Just look at Europe. The amount of religion in Europe is much less, and all social indices are much better than ours. Their rates of infant mortality, of murder, of suicide, of poverty. The secular countries on most social indices are better than the United States. So I'm not. A secular United States would be, I think, would be better off if we had social safety nets. If I think, I don't know if you saw that New York Times did an article a couple of weeks ago about the fall off in faith in the United States. It's significant. And it hadn't, it hadn't led to any problems I've seen. But obviously, look, I'm obviously biased.
Yeah. Okay. Where you at, Kent? We want to save the great sisterhood for last. Kent, what's up, man? Hey. How you doing, man? Pseudo Kill official, man.
I'm good, man. How's it going, man? Appreciate you, Andy Thompson. Man, it's a great presentation. This is a very good show for us to even rewatch in the future. And I'm just glad to have you on, man. Peace to the panel.
No, thank you for coming on a Saturday afternoon.
Oh yeah, man. Marcus kind of already hit on one of my questions that I had for you. I really like your answer there. I'm gonna go back and listen to it again.
Yeah.
One of the questions I had, you kind of answered this too in your answer for that one, is a lot of my friends or whatever, when I come to them about religion not being true or real, so to say, they say, well, I know if I didn't have God, I don't know where I'd be. I'd probably be, under the jail or something like that. I wouldn't turn from my ways or whatever. And so the question comes in like morality, right? A lot of people have a problem with, if you take away religion from people, even though we atheists, if you take away religion from people, some people can't handle the thought of knowing that there is no God and that there's nothing that's controlling, that can punish you if you do something wrong. I wanted to know what I have my thoughts on that already. I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Mine are that that's, to me, that's tragic, because when somebody tells you that if they didn't have religion, they'd be a bad person, Um, that's simply wrong, and they're diminishing themselves, because that person, by the mere statement of that, the fear that they would be bad, they're saying they know what bad is, and they're basically saying they're a good person. They know what bad is, and they don't want to be bad. And so it's a tragedy if they are claiming that they wouldn't be a good person without religion, because in the mere statement that they're making to you along those lines, they're conveying to you that they're a good and decent person, I would argue. That's number one. Number two is very simply, I mean, there are going to be bad people who will do bad things. That's human nature. We got people they're bad people who will do bad things. But most of us are good people who will do good things. And the argument is that if you want good people to do bad things, you need religion. Religion teaches out-group hatred. Think of the Muslims. A non-Muslim is an infidel and deserves to be killed. And so I think, I really firmly believe, think that the evidence supports that. I mean, there are good people will do good things. Bad people will do bad things, but you want good people to do terrible things, they're usually going to require religious indoctrination to do it. Like,
I agree.
The suicide bombers. So that's the second part. Now, the third part is, which I love, is there's all this, again, it gets back to education and knowledge. There's all this extraordinary research on we're born with moral systems. We're hardwired with moral systems. And there's these fascinating research on that. I would look at, if you Google the moral life of babies, it'll pull up a New York Times magazine article, and you can link to some of the videos in the Yale research. But my favorite, I mean, you want to talk to your friend, there's the top journal in science is Nature. It's the top scientific journal in the world. And they deem this research so important that they published it. And the main researcher is a woman named Kylie Hamlin. And they take like 1-year-old infants sitting in their mother's laps, and they show them puppets. And there's a helper puppet that helps a puppet up a hill. And there's a hinderer puppet that knocks the one back down. So there's a good puppet and a bad puppet. And a 1-year-old, when the puppets are presented to them, will reach for the good puppet. That may sound simple, but what they point out is that here's an infant, a pre-verbal infant, that has made a social judgment about agents that it's never seen before and is not interacting with personally. This 1-year-old infant has the cognitive hardware to make a social judgment, to make a distinction between good, helpfulness, bad, hinderer. It's extraordinary. And it gets even wilder. If there's a punisher puppet, so you got the helper puppet, you got the hinderer puppet, and then you've got a puppet that punishes the hinderer. And if an infant is shown the puppet that punished the bad one, the infant will reach for that. So they can not only distinguish between nice and naughty, they can distinguish between nice, naughty, and justice, deserved punishment. These are 1-year-old infants, right? And it's extraordinary. And then the other one to look up is Felix, and you can show these videos to your friend who's saying this. Felix Warneken, Warnecken, and he was a researcher in Germany. He's now at Harvard, and he did all this stuff on altruism and young children. And again, we're just hardwired for altruism. I mean, and he's got some of them are comical. I mean, he's got these kids that just like are 1.5 years old that can barely walk, and he's a stranger to them. And in the videos, these kids are trying to help him. They're humorous, but they're brilliant. And he shows that we're hardwired for altruism. I mean, so your friend who says that is it's both tragic for your friend, but also it's scientifically wrong.
Right. Yeah, I agree, man. I believe, we evolved with those abilities, like you said just now. We evolved to be social and to stay within the group, because being outcasted outside of the group meant, your survivability was low.
Yeah, you're socially excluded. You're dead.
Barbecue chicken on the savannah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and that's why all of us have considerable social anxiety. It's an echo of the ancient years where if you were excluded, it could be quite deadly. That's why we're very sensitive to, what is it? FMO, fear of missing out.
Yep. And one last thing, if you like I tell my friend, I said, man, if you need religion to be a good person, then you're just a bad person. Like, you just ain't no good. If you need that in order to be good, But yeah, that's all I wanted to ask, man. I appreciate your time, man.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Thanks for the questions. I mean, I learned a lot in the Q&As. I mean, I really do appreciate this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Y'all listen to the Community of Skeptics, man. Pseudo Killas, man. Podcast, man. Y'all know what it is. Bringing groundbreaking information to the community that's not used to having this type of information presented in the way it's presented, man.
I'm curious what conversation. Go ahead. I don't know if Joel is still here, but I mean, what's it like? Because I assume many of your friends and families and colleagues are, Christian and believers. What is it like for you all?
What's it like for me? I just bulldoze them. I don't know. I've been doing it for years.
I don't know.
Conversation is good for me with the family. I mean, we do it during the holidays. I give them a break all year, but we sit down during the holidays and we get it in. So, they just look at me like, man, like you're doing a lot. And I'm like, yeah, man, you're doing a lot. And so it's an interesting back and forth. And through the whole process, though, I think I've been able to actually educate. And I use I actually use my family as a launching pad, right? I practiced on them before I went outside. That was for me. Go ahead, you do somebody else. What?
Well, my circumstance is a bit different. And by the way, thank you, Dr. Andy. I hope you don't mind me calling you that.
Oh, just call me Andy, for God's sakes.
Oh my God. Okay, Andy. I just want to say we appreciate you in supporting us in our due diligence to push scientific literacy, first off. But for me, it's a bit different. Of course, I'm raised in a traditional African-American Southern household. So, being raised Southern Baptist and maybe having different ideals, I understand that's more personal. So I don't necessarily, try to argue that point at the dinner table out of respect for tradition and my elders. I do more of focusing on the scientific literacy part and not so much on the personal aspect. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you can't. People aren't going to, I've learned the hard way not to argue with people.
Right.
You just can't. And and realistically, I'm not being nice if I'm spoiling people's dinner.
Right. So, I still attend church, but I also take it as a community effort. Like I support our community endeavors and things of that nature. But I also use it as a platform to push scientific literacy. So if people are open, then, I make sure that they're welcomed and they are able to express themselves and question, and that's where I'm at with it.
Atheists in church, boy, that's interesting to me right there.
Well, they're more than you think. My favorite joke is, do you know what you call a Jewish atheist?
What?
Jewish.
You funny.
Facts.
Yeah. But no, it's it. But it was fascinating. I had in my private practice at one time, I had like 6 Southern Baptist, 6, 1. I had quite a few Southern Baptist ministers, and 2 of them had lost their faith, and one of them tried to create a business, and it failed. And his wife was minister of music and still a believer. and his kids had become atheist, but he's a substitute preacher, and he says that he, tries to preach sermons that, are that he tries to, that are just about goodness and kindness and things like that. But it's real hard for him. I know quite a few, and I know plenty of people who are in families where, they couldn't come out of the closet. And I live close. Oh, the other thing too is that when you mentioned the Southern Baptist thing, I live about an hour and a half from Jerry Falwell's Empire, Liberty University, Thomas Road Baptist Church, and a lot of in Lynchburg, and a lot of not a lot, but a fair number of students come to University of Virginia from Lynchburg, and I've had patients who the families literally just cut them off. I mean, completely cut them off when they revealed that they weren't believers anymore. And it's just heartbreaking, because these were wonderful young people, smart, wonderful young people, and the families disowned them, stopped talking to them, just cut them off. And it was, they paid a very heavy price for saying, that they had lost their faith.
Miss Tiff, you want to ask a question?
Yep, had a question.
Yeah.
So
Drop that link too.
I was kind of peering into our chat, and this is something that comes up often when we talk about belief and how the belief in gods or religions or whatnot can be not necessarily a good thing for people. So then they go on this whole, what it appears to me is this extreme no belief. I'm so glad I don't believe. So I can understand not wanting to believe in a religion and or God, but in your practice, where do you find that belief may be still helpful for us as humans in our development, continued development?
Well,
minus the God and the religion piece.
I'm sorry. What was that? I'm sorry. Say that again.
What?
Minus the God and religion piece.
Well,
what role could it still play in our lives?
What role can religion play in our lives?
No, belief.
What religion? Well, first of all, my apologies, because we talked and I couldn't pull up your name, Tiffany, and
It's okay.
No, it's not. I hate losing my memory with old age. I think Daniel Dennett thinks that there's, belief in belief has some mitigating power. I don't know if I agree with him on that. So that the thing, having some belief in belief might have some impact. I think I would not try to. I don't try to argue anybody out of their faith, but I would never get in an argument with somebody whose faith brings them comfort and they are in terrible circumstances. They've got an incurable illness. They've got a child that is, driving them to an early grave. I think you have to, first and foremost, you want to treat people as you hope they would treat you. And so I think, if people want to believe, I think I'm not going to, I really stay away from arguing with people. Two examples, 2 points on this. Darwin had figured it out by 1837. So he's 38 years old. He's figured out natural selection. His wife was a strong believer, and he had told her, and there are letters that survive where he had told her, and she had reacted strongly. How could you not believe? And so he sat on his idea for 20 plus years, and the only reason he published was because Wallace had sent him a paper. Wallace had stumbled on the theory of natural selection, and Darwin was not going to publish because of upsetting his wife. It would have, the most important person in his life. And there are letters that survive from Emma to him that were clearly quite painful. And he said, I cried over these all the time. So people, and they'd had some children die, and her belief, part of her belief was that she desperately hoped she would be reunited with the children that she had lost. And so you're not going to argue or challenge somebody like that. The other point that I want to make, when you were talking about the role of belief, and this is somewhat related, here's where I think we have a problem. If people want to believe, it's fine with me, if they want to do that. But keep it away from my children and keep it away from our government. People forget that, James Madison, people forget Madison. Religion should have no cognizance in civil government. I mean, Madison had studied societies and governments and societies up until that time, and one thing he saw was that what was crucial for a democracy was secular democracy, was a wall between religion and government. And I think that's another place where I would part company. If people want to believe, fine, but it should stay out of government and it should stay away from children. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are the things that came to mind.
It was a great response, but let me just give you an example of what I'm speaking of. So
Okay.
we have groups of people that don't believe in a God, for instance, but they come together as a community. They depend on one another. They build sustainable communities for their present and their future. And so what is it that binds them together? Should there be a trust or I won't say faith because that's religious based, or a belief that Kent is going to do his part. Juju is going to do her part. I'm going to do my part. So that's what I mean when I say, what role can belief still have in our lives, sans religion or God?
Well, I think that demonstrates that you don't need religion. You've got a group.
That's fine. I'm not arguing that at all.
Yeah, but I think you give evidence that one can have groups of human beings that are non-kin, that rely on each other, right, that are social networks of friends and rely on each other and
to do our part. So
but that I would just argue that's humanity. That's basic humanity. You don't need anything other than that.
Right, but I'm trusting that everybody's going to do their part.
Right. And if somebody doesn't, and
kick them out.
Right. Well, there's a percentage of people. 2% of every population are sociopaths. I mean,
boy.
Right? If somebody doesn't do their part, then there's their group breaks off from them. But
right.
Obviously I think you can have trusting communities. You don't need
a God or a religion. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I just wanted to know your feedback on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm trying to think, but yeah,
because now belief takes on such a it's almost like a pejorative to some people now. Like they're happy to say, I don't believe in anything, and I'm thinking that's ridiculous. You don't even believe in your ability to achieve anything in life.
That's
I get that.
I don't believe nothing. Really? You don't believe nothing?
Excuse me.
Leave her alone.
Andy. I thought it was just me getting beat up by the daggone women. Now I see this equal opportunity.
Yo.
Well, look, that's their job. Keep us in line.
If you don't mind,
well, I thought it was me. I ain't even mad. No. Oh man, boy, I'm telling you, that's a good one.
Well, I don't know. When people say they believe in nothing, I guess I would be. and they're strident about it. I mean, I'm a shrink, so I would start getting curious about what's driving it. Why are they so strident about it? There's something going on under the surface that we don't yet see.
Thank you.
But that's
Can I squeeze on my
armchair
small question?
psychiatry.
Thank you, Andy. Go ahead, sis.
I didn't mean to
Andy,
force
you let her back in the game, Andy.
I'm sorry.
Leave her alone, Bobby.
Stop.
Stand down.
Stand down. No,
Lady
go ahead,
killers
then
in the
we want to
building.
get
I want to ask my
Moses,
small
Moses.
question really quick. I don't want
There's
to.
noise where I'm at. Let Braz go. I'm gonna be out of here in 1 second.
All right, go ahead.
Can I
Go ahead.
actually ask my small question, please? I didn't actually get to ask the question.
Yes, ma'am. What are you waiting on? Waiting on you.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Andy, this may not necessarily be based on belief in a sense, but you are evolutionary psychologist, psychiatrist. So I usually hear people say, speaking on common sense and things of that nature. And I usually respond by common sense will kill you. So if you can like qualify that statement, could you explain somewhat, how our senses can deceive us in a sense? If that makes sense.
The middle of your question got garbled by the technology. How our common sense can deceive us?
Yeah, because lots of people like to say common sense, and we usually subscribe more to critical and logical thinking, which we separate that, and how that common sense based on like your senses can be deceiving at times. Can you expound on that a bit more?
Sure.
If you can clarify that?
Sure. Yeah, I think anything we can do to support critical thinking, we want to do. Because unfortunately, all of us are biased to accept things unquestioningly. We're all biased to believe it and not ask questions, or believe it and ask questions later. And that may come from as everything does, from our ancestry. If you tell me that there is an invading group on the other side of the hill, what's best? For me to go with you, or to say, wait a second, I'm going to go check it out myself, right? So accepting unquestioningly other people's belief may have had survival advantage, right? So, critical thinking is something that we have to learn, we have to work at. The doubt muscles in our brain are pretty weak, and we have to constantly try to strengthen them. We are all vulnerable to something called self-deception. And a guy named Robert Trivers wrote the foreword to Richard Dawkins' 1976 original publication of The Selfish Gene. And it's worth pulling up Trivers' foreword, because he just threw out this brilliant idea, which turned out to be true, which is natural selection designs our brains not to see the truth. That actually there is advantage to what he called self-deception. And he laid out in that foreword, he laid out how evolution could select for self-deception. It is utterly brilliant. And it's just kind of a little thing in his foreword to Dawkins' book. And he subsequently wrote he subsequently wrote a book, The Folly of Fools, and about self-deception. And if you pull it up, he's got some TED Talks on self-deception.
Okay.
That are good. Robert Trivers. The tragedy with Trivers is that he has, and he's open about it, I mean, he has really severe bipolar disorder, bipolar type 1, and he has sadly spent a lot of his life ill. And on top of his bipolar type 1, he got pretty bad marijuana addiction. he's one of the most brilliant biologists since Darwin, and he laid out how our brains are actually designed not to see the truth.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
So
it is. And I would look at Trivers. Just pull up he did a TED talk in Jamaica, I think, on it, and his book is good, the Folly of Fools. But
got it.
I think I've got it on my computer. I'll send it to Bobby, but I've got a copy on my computer. The copy of his foreword to. It's the most famous foreword in biology, and maybe one of the most famous forewords in all of science.
So ignorance is bliss.
No, well, yeah, no, we're designed to. Well, we all have an optimistic bias,
right?
I mean, we all are. There are a few people that are grumps, but most of us, our baseline is optimistic. We're more optimistic than the world would dictate.
Thank you.
It's excellent. No, it's excellent question. And again, so it's a very good question, because the capacity for self-deception is, again, one of the mechanisms that leaves us vulnerable to religious belief. So, it's another one of the mechanisms.
All right. Hey, y'all know what it is. Y'all listen to the Pseudo Killas community of skeptics. All right, man. Y'all know, hit that Cash App often and early. Logic, you ready?
I got one question. Can I put the link in the Discord?
Yeah, you can drop the link in the general chat now.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, when we drop the link in the general chat, make sure you come up here with some decorum, because that black hole gonna suck you out of here real fast if you don't. Ask the hard questions. It's not a problem, but be respectful with how you approach the situation. We appreciate the discourse. Having a discourse for expert is important for the growth of the community. Go ahead, Logic.
What's up, Andy?
Hello.
Hey, so I got a question for you. So how would you maybe approach the idea of a community that has a belief? I think it's a belief. They're having a deep connection with African history and African culture can just automatically produce a healthy self-identity for yourself, as African Americans, more specifically.
And how can a deep appreciation for that?
Right. How can being able to have a deep appreciation, a deep understanding in African culture and African history, how could that possibly provide a psychological, I'm not even sure, not even necessarily psychological, right? But what could that possibly provide in the African American community as a whole, for a larger perspective?
And
do you understand my question?
I think, but I want to make sure you're talking about how could knowledge about African history or African American history?
African history and culture, how could that possibly provide something for African Americans in their current paradigm? What would you say that might actually do for them?
Well, I think all of us should be aware of African history. I think it's important that all of us understand that we're all African, that we're African apes, and that what makes us human is Africa. I mean, it is it's African hunter-gatherers. It's because of African hunter-gatherers, particularly a resilient group of, as I understand the history, a resilient group of African hunter-gatherers around 70,000 years ago survived the climate catastrophe from whatever that volcano, Krakatoa, I think it was, that erupted, and we're here because of them, and it is, African history is the original history of human beings, and
okay,
and I think that you got to start from that. And how many people know that? I mean, how many people really understand that history, and so that and that African history and African culture is going to reflect, deep time. And one of the most important sources of what makes us human is the few surviving hunter-gatherer groups. That's a window into deep time. I don't know how much you follow it, but there have been, in the last 20 years, extraordinary finds in Africa of our ancestors. Just in the last years, Homo naledi, Homo sediba. Our history as human beings is primarily and foremost an African history.
Uh-huh. So from the way I'm hearing you answer the question, is you're saying that the humanity, the whole globe, can gain a greater appreciation for the process of humans becoming humans, right? By being able to see the big picture for how we actually left the tree, whatever that organism was that was more of a tree-bearing organism than something that started walking on the ground and eventually became Homo sapiens sapiens. That sounds like that's
all of us still contain traits of Lucy.
Right.
Sometime, just to give you one of my favorite examples is that if you're tonight, if you're with a woman, just both of you take your shoes off and flex your foot forward, okay? And the women are going to be able to flex their foot forward further than you and I. Men can't do dorsiflexion to the same degree that women can. That's thought to be a legacy of Lucy, that the males left the trees a little bit earlier and the females stayed more able, or stayed up in the trees better or longer, and that's a legacy of Lucy.
That's actually amazing.
That all of us carry, and we're all we're all mammals, we're all primates, we're all hominids, we're all hominins. It's just,
I got you.
And it's just, so there's nothing that gives me more pleasure than, the occasional opportunity to tell a white supremacist he's African.
Oh, man.
Wait a minute. I like that answer, right? All right. So hold up a second. I'm still trying to rephrase my question, right? I'm trying to get an answer that's probably more specific to our conscious community and some of the ways that we deal with this, right? So go ahead.
Well, I don't look. First of all, I really don't know, and because I worry about. I grew up in the segregated South. I remember the awfulness of the segregated South, and I worry about anything that creates racial segregation, and it worries me, and I see. I'm just real worried about identity politics and racial segregation. At the same time, obviously, and far better than I, the African American community has had to and tragically still has to fight for basic rights. And so having a strong identity as African Americans in some way is crucial, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I worry about. I remember the segregated South. It just.
Okay. I really appreciate that answer, right? So based on how you phrase that, right? What kind of advice would you give? People like us in the conscious community who are looking to recreate a self-identity without overly racializing or segregating ourselves from other groups of people?
look, I don't have the wisdom to tell you. I don't know. I think you have. I think the reality is, it's a very difficult task. How do you fight for basic rights that have long been denied, and that once and that you know I remember the Civil Rights Act. I remember the Voting Rights Act. I was alive during all of that period, and now I never thought I'd see the day where we were going backwards on voting rights and suppression of voting, and the suppression is clearly racist. I mean, it's just the suppression of African American voters, and I never thought I'd see that day. How do you do what you just laid out? How do you create an identity and a powerful political identity, and how do you try to reverse some of this awful stuff that's happening, and at the same time not have it lead to segregation? I think you all have
it's one heck of a task.
you have a tough road, and I don't have the wisdom to tell you. I don't know.
No, I appreciate that honesty. Go ahead.
My fault. Yeah, so that question right there is a great question, but in my humble opinion, I think it's best fit for the African American community to work those things out, and when we work them out, then other people will actually join the message. I think it's important, based off of our shared experiences and the lessons learned in the past, for us to be the ones to identify that. And I think this group actually we've identified that misinformation on African history is whack.
Right.
That's the point. That it's not the history aspect of it, it's the misrepresentation of it, it's the falsehood, it's the nonsense, it's the racializing of it, it's the complete foolery of it that puts us all the way in the back. Like Andy said, he said, man, he think the whole world should understand our humanness. That was a hell of an answer right there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, let's take it broader. I mean, I'm sure you all have read about the racism in China and Japan. I mean, that the racism against any people of color. How many Chinese know that they're African?
Right.
Right. How many I mean, and again, here's where we're up against evolution. I mean, it's pretty clear that we all have biases. We're all vulnerable to in-group bonding, out-group hatred. Okay. And it's in our humor. Just to give you one local example, one of the local jokes is, I'm at UVA. Do you know what the N in Clemson stands for?
What?
Knowledge. Making fun of the people at Clemson. And so that's an in-group bias, out-group denigration, and we're all vulnerable to that. My other, one of my other favorite jokes along those lines is, so there's a plane crash. There's one survivor. It's a Jewish middle-aged guy, sort of cast away on an island. And it's years before, a ship comes by. He's able to wave down. The ship comes in to rescue him. And they're looking around the island where this guy's lived for a couple of years. And there are two identical buildings there. And the people that are rescuing him say, excuse me, but why do you have two identical buildings? He says, oh, those are synagogues. And they said, well, why do you need two synagogues? He said, oh, of course I have two synagogues. That one over there is the one I worship in. That other one, I would never go in there. And it's a joke about, but it's a joke about our evolved vulnerabilities for in-group loyalty, out-group anger. So we're all sitting on these capacities.
All right, when you ask your question, I'm gonna get you out of here so we can get more people up on here.
Thank
Due
you, Bobby.
diligence. Yeah,
I was
due
just gonna say
diligence. You
that.
got a question? What was that, Brass? Hold on, Brass. You was next.
Yeah. I
Hey, get your
appreciate it.
question. Get you out of here.
Yeah, and Andy, you did an amazing job. An amazing job. I don't know what they call it in the community, but you gave me a lot of daggers that I could use to be in conversation. But I actually have two questions.
But look, thank you. But Bobby's got the slides. Anybody that wants to use them, please.
No, I'm talking about more like the offhand stuff you would say in the descriptions. I watched a couple of your other videos beforehand, but let me get to it because I know other people want to go. I have two questions, but I just want you to ask one and just answer one, but you choose.
Ask them both, please.
I know, but
We can't hear you.
If he's having difficulty, I'm going to ask his questions for him because he said he was having some difficulty. So give me.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Brass.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. It's a Saturday for me. I got kids and we flooding in New Jersey. But the first question would be: you've questioned in the past. You made a statement in a video I saw a long time ago, but refreshed my memory this week about punishment deserved versus punishment as a virtue. So if you could expound just a little bit on that, I'd appreciate it because I drew my own conclusion, but I'd like to hear yours. And the second question, and you can answer either one or both, it's up to you. Can you expound on when Coyne said that the only choice available to you is the one that you made? I know you support that, but just could you explain it? Because it makes sense to me, but I'd just like to get a view of exactly how you would discuss that or how you would explain it. Thanks.
Sure. Let me do the second one first. The concept of free will is based on two assumptions. One, that you are the conscious agent of your choices, that you're completely free to make a choice. And you and I make a choice, we're completely free to do it. We have free will. Okay. But the second assumption that underlies any concept of free will is that if you have free will, that it means that you could have chosen otherwise. And the point is that when you make a decision at a given point in time, that's the only decision you could have made at that point in time. All the things that led to that decision, led to that decision. It was made, and you could not have done other than you did at that point in time. Okay, so you can't go back and reverse a decision. And if you can't go back and reverse a decision, any decision you made is the only decision you could make at that point in time. And if you find it hard to get your head around, it's because it is hard. I had to read Sapolsky and Coyne multiple times and listen to a lot of Sam Harris videotapes on free will and read his book, and before you get to be able to see this. Let me give you one more example. If I show you a picture of two roads, one going downhill, one going uphill, and I ask you, choose which road you want to take, and you choose the road on the right going uphill, and you make that choice. What science now shows us is that your brain made the choice for that right-hand turn upwards of a half a second before you were conscious of that choice.
You're familiar with that.
So consciousness is really the remembered present. Any decision you made before you were conscious of that decision. Okay. And when you made that decision, there are multiple forces going into that decision, which you're unaware of, which you have no conscious awareness of, but you think you made a completely free choice. Let me give you one more example. There's this unbelievable study of Israeli judges. It's like 8 Israeli judges that were parole judges, and they were making decisions about granting parole. And they followed them for like 2 months, 1,000+ decisions. I mean, big in the study. And what they showed, and these are experienced parole judges, that they would start off the day ruling in favor of the parolee 6 out of 10 times early in the day. As the morning progressed, the decisions got down to where they were only making 1 out of 10 decisions in favor of the parolee. Then they got lunch, had a break, they come back, and they start off the afternoon, and they're 6 out of 10 in favor of the parolee. And then as the afternoon goes on, they're making more and more negative decisions in favor of the parolee. They get an afternoon snack, boom, it goes up again, and quickly by the end of the day has fallen off to where, they're not granting anybody parole. These are judges whose conscious experience was they were experienced, they were applying the law, to the specifics of the case in front of them, right? No. They were significantly impacted by factors outside their awareness, which in this case was probably blood glucose level, right? So they thought they were making free will choices. No, that their choices were being influenced by massive other unconscious factors and probably fatigue and blood glucose level. And so we don't have, I think Sapolsky and Coyne are absolutely right. We do not have free will. Our choices are heavily influenced, heavily constrained by factors outside of our conscious awareness. And so at any point in time, the decision you make is the only one you could make at that point in time, right? And you can't go back and rewind the clock. You could not have done otherwise. And this is crucial for instance, the insanity defense. The insanity defense is based on the idea that somebody could have done otherwise. They were so crazy that they didn't understand the constraints of the law, and free will is that's why you never see insanity defenses. They never succeed because one of the bad components of it is it's based on the notion of free will, that somehow the person could have done otherwise than they did at that moment in time. And I don't know if I'm being clear here. And that goes to your it goes to your first question, which is punishment. What is it? Punishment deserved versus punishment. I don't remember the distinction. Punishment. And again, I don't remember the context in which I made those comments, because my views on it have changed. Because I think the part of the tragedy of human nature is when people do terrible things, they could not have done otherwise, and we have to be very cautious about, vindictive punishment and holding them, blaming them as if they could have done otherwise. I think if you're interested in this, I think, Sapolsky's new book is coming out, but he's got, great talks on this. And also, if you can get your hands on his book, Behave, chapter 16 is about free will in the criminal justice system. But I think that the idea of moralistic punishment as policy is got to be questioned with what we know of the science. Let me give you one other example that's utterly fascinating and speaks to this point. In 1944, the Nazis starved out northern Holland. It's called the Dutch Hunger Winter. And the Dutch kept very good records. So they know what happened to the people that were conceived during the starvation in northern Holland. And the people are born, and they've been followed for 70, 80 years now. And so the only factor is what happened when these people were in their mother's womb, and their mothers were being starved in their pregnancy. And these individuals had higher rates of schizophrenia, higher rates of depression, higher rates of cardiac disease, higher rates of obesity. But the other thing that was fascinating is they had higher rates of antisocial problems, antisocial personality problems, sociopathic problems. And the variable was, they were hungry in the womb. How can you hold that person morally responsible for behaviors that were shaped before they ever entered the world?
That's interesting right there.
Yeah.
Very,
no,
very.
I mean, and it gets even worse. I mean, most of the people on death row have you can show have prefrontal cortex damage.
May I just? This is not a question. This is just a request, Bobby. Can we have Andy back to talk specifically on mental health and mental illness? He's like,
hey, we definitely need that, don't we?
We would definitely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, due diligence. Where you at? Make sure we'll cut this off in 20 minutes, 3 hours.
Peace.
What's going on? What's your question? Answer your question, man, and listen to the answer in the chat. Go ahead, bro.
All right. I just wanted to first, I got a question, but I just wanted to touch on the racial overtones that he was touching on in science. And I really want to appreciate that because it hits different coming from someone like you. And we still dealing with it today. And I like how you separate, evolution from natural selection, because, evolution helped bring in some of the pseudoscience that we're still trying to get rid of out of science.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like,
hold on, dude. Separated what from what? What?
Natural selection. I like how he focuses on that he uses the verbiage natural selection instead of evolution.
He didn't, because natural. That, though. You misheard that. Go ahead. You got him. Go ahead. Talk. Go ahead.
I mean, I will let him speak for himself.
Go ahead.
Well, no, it's. Are you talking about evolution of like racism, evolution of pseudoscience, the terrible? No, there was. I mean, Darwin was terribly misused in the early 20th century. The social Darwinism and I mean, all the stuff about inferior races. I mean, there's a terrible history of what was called social Darwinism. It's a shameful history.
Well, here's the point, though,
and that's separate from evolution by natural selection. Evolution just means change.
Thank you. That's the point that I was getting at, and I appreciate you making the distinction because we're trying to do it.
No,
what are you talking about? I'm talking. Why I can't converse with the man?
No. I want to make sure the show goes clear. We're talking about Charles Darwin, evolution, and natural selection. You can't separate that. That's totally different from what you're trying to say. You're trying to act like that Charles Darwin, natural selection, and evolution is two separate things. No, don't confuse that.
No, that's not what I meant, and he explained what I meant better than you did.
I just want to make sure I'm not out the game. Go ahead.
So the point that I was trying to land there, and then I'm going to ask my question and get on out the way because Bobby ain't gonna let me do too much. The point that I was getting at, I find it the irony about it is here we are in the 21st century, and how America stood on taking the humanity away from the African, and now we know in the 21st century that you can't have a human without the African. So we need to, and the thing is, so now that we need to get America to accept that, because the next step in that is reparations. If America is really accept that, then we're talking about dehumanizing the people. You know what I mean? Crimes against humanity. You can't have humanity without the African. So they need to make that right. So here's my question. My question is, I feel like some of our constructs are getting in our way of science still today, because whenever we're dealing with these different type of archaic humans and different humans, we tend to label them, and we put these labels on them, and then we think it's like different things instead of one continuous thing. And I think it can kind of stagnate us. And my humble opinion, now you're more qualified to say than I am, but I just want to know what you think about that, because I feel like it's still we still have a lot of pseudoness to get out the way in science. And I feel like drawing these hard lines between these different things that are more related than we think. The differences is not that big, but sometimes the small differences can make big changes, I guess, or big appearance changes, appear big.
Huh?
I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but
Well,
Jesus.
I mean, I think I think I understand, but if I don't, please correct me. I think it's a loaded situation. Okay. We're all fundamentally human. We are all Africans, and all human traits are basically all African, right? And all, as I said, all 8 billion people on the earth today are the descendants of a small group of hunter-gatherers that survived climate change about 70,000 years ago. We and there was evolution, and there are differences. There are human differences, and there are human differences in most traits. But you cannot use those differences for discrimination. And I think that's where we get into deep trouble, and where we've been in deep trouble. And obviously one of the worst places that it was used was the social Darwinism, which was actually pretty strong in this country. And people don't want to acknowledge that Hitler, his race laws against the Jews, all the race laws that they came up with were, based on a lot of the social Darwinism in the United States. It's a very ugly history. But you've got to, I think you have to acknowledge differences, but then those differences cannot be used for discrimination and legal discrimination. I think that's where I think you have to be forever, vigilant. And as I said, because we're all vulnerable to be prejudiced. We're all sitting on prejudices. If we're all honest with ourselves, we have prejudices. And one of the things that gets in the way is we tend to see groups not as groups of individuals. We tend to see groups as just groups. The French are rude. Well, really? I mean, come on. Is every Frenchman rude? No. But we tend to be biased, and we're all, and I think we all have to be forever vigilant, and the vigilance has to be encoded into laws, where you can't deny people, you can't deny people basic human rights. And in the United States, you can't deny them, earned
Agreed.
civil rights. I mean,
so what about how they be trying to make the difference between the Homo sapien and the Neanderthal? Because I feel like some of our
the next person's time now.
Yeah.
excuse me.
Hold on.
I want to make.
You know what? Hold on. Everybody stop.
We got some people on here that haven't spoken yet.
Hold on. So, Andy, his question is about Neanderthal and Homo sapiens sapien. Right. There seems to be a discrepancy in the non-expert community over this. And I'll just give it to you straight. What they say is that white people are Neanderthal and Africans are a different type of Homo sapiens sapiens, some wild thing like that. So I'm gonna let you answer the question. His real question is
No,
that
don't say
we're
what my
trying to
real question is
separate.
because I haven't even asked it.
So
Don't
go
do
ahead.
that.
So
You
ask the
can,
question.
yeah,
Go
let me
ahead.
ask that because that's
Ask the
wild how
question.
you
But I
just
just
gonna
want to
cut
give
it.
him some foresight
But
on
that's not what
how
I'm
he's
even gonna
going.
ask. Quit trying
Hey,
to jump
Go
ahead
ahead.
of me and
Go
just let
ahead.
me do my thing. You keep
Go
doing
ahead.
that.
I want to
Okay.
say something as far as housekeeping, though. We have a
Well, we
specific,
housekeep him out of here.
yeah, we have a specific conversation
And he
going on
switched it up.
here. So I would like for people when they come on the panel to keep your questions relevant to the conversation
I
and the
think that's smart.
presentation that was
I think that's
presented.
smart.
Please and thank you.
Yeah, I think that's smart. We can keep that moving. We ain't got to hit that. Get somebody else hit the lane. Go ahead. Who was next? Was that? Oh,
Well,
Shadow
look,
Band.
but let me go back to, I don't know what the question was, but I think again it gets back to what I was saying: is we have to have honest education. Neanderthals were our relatives, right?
Fact.
We split off from Neanderthals, something like 450,000 years ago. I mean, our immediate ancestor was thought to be Homo heidelbergensis, and they were also Neanderthals. The Homo heidelbergensis that made it into Europe were the ancestors of Neanderthals, and people who come from Africa have fewer Neanderthal genes.
Correct.
Because it was the Homo sapiens that left Africa that mated with Neanderthals. And like I have probably 4 to 5% of my genome is Neanderthal. Now, my wife knew that long before the geneticists figured it out. But this is where you get back to the science, and the Neanderthal genes that we maintained probably had something to do with our immune system. That the humans that were the product of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens matings, the Neanderthal genes may have conferred some benefit to immune systems. And obviously the greatest killer for most of our evolutionary history was in infectious diseases. And so the Neanderthal question is an interesting one, but the fact that Africans have fewer Neanderthal genes is, I mean, it's a fact of science that should not be used in any way for any kind of discrimination. I mean, it's science, and it's interesting science, and it has, the Neanderthal genes have been implicated in a whole bunch of illnesses. So it's relevant for science and medical science, but again, it shouldn't be used in any way for any kind of discrimination. I mean, it's it's yeah. I mean, and again, it gets back to education. I mean, we should be teaching there are people that have textbooks for children on human evolution. Those should be, it goes back to one of the earlier questions, that should be in, elementary, you start teaching in elementary school.
Oh, I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and
So
I
there
think
you
that
go, due diligence. That's your answer to your question there, brother. Okay, where you at, Donovan? Real rap.
Right here. Hey man, I was in first, man.
Oh, hold on, yeah. What you? Oh, go ahead, Morpheus. My fault. Go ahead, Morpheus. Speak up.
Yeah,
Speak up.
yeah. I'm gonna be in and out. Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson, let me ask you a question. You said that the human brain was developed to not see the truth. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's a little bit of an overstatement. There's a solid argument that we don't always see the truth, that we're biased a lot towards not seeing the truth clearly. Obviously, we if we work at it, I think there's the argument that we can see the truth, but we all have capacities for self-deception.
Right. So that coincides some conversations that we have that Bobby speaks about a lot of time. Remember, Bobby was talking about the believing brain and how we're wired to believe first, right? So I'm thinking about that with what you said. And here's the question: if that's true, would it be fair to say that critical thinking and using logic actually goes against our nature or nature?
Well, it's part of our nature, but it needs to be constantly tended to and developed. And I think it's also the capacity for rationality is part of our nature too. I mean, we're a mixed bag, and but we have, and that's why Steve Pinker has a new book on rationality. And what's fascinating about it is that he opens the book and he makes the argument that our critical thinking, our rationality, comes from our hunter-gatherers who learned how to track animals. That what makes us our abilities for analytic reasoning and critical thinking actually comes from the ability to hunt. And if you can get your hands on the book, it's called Rationality, and the opening chapter about that is just breathtaking. And he talks about, and there's a particular anthropologist that he utilizes who spent a lot of time with the Kung San and showed how their ability to track animals is the bedrock of critical thinking.
Right.
The rest of the book is kind of a tough slog. I will say I'm bogged down in it now, but the first chapter is just wonderful. So again, critical thinking is part of our nature.
Right. So how does that harmonize with the believing brain? You know what I mean?
Because because we're not talking about the belief in God. So basically, if you listen to the whole lecture, what he was saying was that these cognitive abilities have actually been co-opted by God and religion. You get that?
Right.
No, go back and listen to it again.
No, I'm talking about not. I wasn't necessarily talking about God, just like this believing in general. You know what I mean? Like our first instinct is to
remember
believe.
The example he gave about being upstairs, and you don't, and something crashed through your door.
Right.
And like in the book, if you get the book right, he talks about how we never make a mistake in calling a human a shadow, but we always make the mistake.
Right, but I'm saying so your first instinct, right, is to believe first, right?
Yeah, we're all credulous. You
right, that's my point.
You believe first, and you ask questions later.
Right, that's my point. So that if our first instinct is to believe and to critical think, right, and use logic, right, is not our first instinct, then wouldn't it be fair to say that the first, the critical thing and logic is actually going against, your instinct, which is nature? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
you understand what I'm saying?
Okay, but step back. They're both aspects of human nature. I believe first, and I ask questions later. But I still have that capacity for analytic reasoning, and part of Pinker's argument is that capacity for analytic reasoning actually comes also from our history as hunters. So we've got the ability for analytic reasoning, but we also are vulnerable to believe first and ask questions later. And I think most of the mechanisms that go into belief have to do with social bonding. My survival in ancestral environments, if you and I were in ancestral environments, our survival absolutely depended on us being connected with the other people. I mean, our survival absolutely counted on being bonded to the other people in our group. And so I'm going to think twice about going against the belief of the group, right? But I've got capacities for analytic reasoning that also help me survive and help me solve problems of tracking animals. Is that?
Yeah.
They're both part of human nature. But
I got it when you said it. It's all part of human nature.
Yeah, the religious stuff. If religious ideas, religious beliefs usually hijack what are social cognitive mechanisms that have to do with group cohesion, cooperation, those kind of things, and attachment. I'm not going to, people are hesitant to go against the belief of a group because you could not afford to be excluded from the group. I mean, you're dead.
Yeah,
so we're biased to go along with, and also authority. We'll submit to authority without question because, again, that was safer. What is it? You don't pull on Superman's cape. You don't.
Stone Age, right, is the problem, right?
Yeah, you don't. I mean, and so it's most of the mechanisms that go into religious belief are social cognitive mechanisms.
Got you. All right, we got about 3 more minutes. Real Rap, what's up?
The neck of time, bro. Get in the last minute, man. Dope presentation, Dr. Andy. Appreciate you. My question is, what inspired the Homo sapien brain to expand past what archaic humans' capability, and was it the ability to plan and think ahead? I got you.
Yeah,
was it the ability
to
plan and think ahead?
Juju can ask the question for you because you done.
You're breaking. It's breaking. It's breaking up.
Yeah, you in the. Yeah, they got you.
Mr.
Anderson got you.
The question was what led to the expansion of archaic human brains to Homo sapiens today?
Was that it, Juju? Was that the question, Juju? You know it, right?
Juju. Yes, pretty much. Yeah, can you hear me? Pretty much.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I am. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right. I'm going to ask a question then. Okay, I wasn't clear.
Yeah, no, that's what I thought it was.
The question.
What led to the evolution of Homo sapiens brain from archaic Homo brain?
Right. And the rest of it was, is it the ability to plan or think ahead, or more possible outcomes which led to our species' success to survive over other hominins? That was his total question.
First of all, I'm not an expert on that. Second, it's one of the great questions that's being pursued by the people who research human evolution. My understanding is that what led to the evolution of our brains the way they are now, the main pressures were dealing with each other. We had conquered the physical environment, but the most challenging part of the environment that created selection pressures were human relationships. So the evolution of theory of mind, being able to think about what other people are thinking, the evolution, as you said, of planning. We spend a lot of our time what they call nexting. I think we spend like half of our time thinking about the future. So the ability to plan ahead, but much of that planning is social planning. Who am I going to talk to? What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Who do I need to see? So much of our future thinking is not when I'm going to do my accounting homework. It's going to be, what am I going to be talking about with so-and-so tomorrow? And so it's what really makes us human is the social cognition, and some of the things I was talking about, cognitive decoupling, being able to have complicated social interactions with people that aren't present. That's huge. All of us right now can, as I said, have a complicated social interaction in our head with President Biden. That's pretty good, right? And it's just, one more step to a God. But so my understanding of the theory is that what makes us human is this development of an ultra social, ultra cooperative social brain. You know, and again, analytic reasoning, capacity for critical thinking is there, but it's not as strong a muscle as some of the other social muscles in our mind brain.
That's interesting. All right, let's get you Shadow Bang. Let's get in, get it out. What you got for us, man? Welcome to the program.
I ask question first, then I know. There's also another side of perspective. When you think about
that's a question?
No, that's a statement.
Oh,
my question is this. I wrote this down so I could quote you right. And it's a long question. When you said there's nothing to give me more pleasure or the opportunity to tell a white supremacist that he's African, are you saying that white people evolve from Africans? And saying that, are you saying that Africans are people who have yet to evolve to white people or any other races of people? Or are you just saying from that continent of Africa? From that region, meaning not the people specifically.
How you messed that up, man? He ain't say that.
Wow.
Well, no, that's a good no, because people can no. I think again it gets back to teaching, teaching what we know. There's so much we know, there's so much we don't know. Is teaching what we know, and what we know is that Homo sapiens left Africa, and went into northern climates, and that there was the amount of light, as I understand it, the amount of light was different, and so we evolved white skin as a way of being able to make more vitamin D, I think it was. But again, there were reasons that white skin evolved, that you're still the fundamental human being. I mean, the trait of white skin had to do with dealing with environments that had little sunlight for little parts of the year, and vitamin D is my understanding. So whiteness was a response to the environment. And no, one is not saying that, therefore sort of African people have yet to evolve to be, white people. I mean, that's, it's that, and we also know that Homo sapiens, we now also know that, Homo sapiens left Africa, but some of them came back to Africa. All the genes in Africa are not, sort of, purely, is my understanding, purely, quote, African. There's gene flow all over the place.
Absolutely.
And I think what happens is alluded to in your question is that, certain things are taken, and people run with it for the purpose of discrimination. And that's not, I don't know if that answers your question, but
can I dig a little deeper in?
No, you done. You got the one question.
Okay,
that was your one question. You got the one. That's it.
Well, this was the comment that Top Cat was bringing, man. I was just trying to. Yeah, this was one of the. Yeah, this was one of the things that Top Cat was saying.
Who is Top Cat? Who is Top Cat?
Never mind, man.
Right. I mean, I'm interested in the second question. You piqued my interest.
What I'm trying to say is this. So, this is the argument that has been presented a lot, is that on the reverse side of the spectrum of this, of what you're saying, people have come to the belief that by this scientific doctrine, that this is a white supremacist way of saying that Black people have yet to evolve.
Yeah.
So while I'm presenting, that's why I presented this statement.
Yeah.
And this is the way you phrased.
Yeah.
The
Well,
way you was explaining it. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I'm if my phrasing in any way conveyed
No,
that,
I'm not saying that. I'm talking about other people who dispute what you're saying would use that argument.
Yeah. No. I
So
just want to be clear. Don't hesitate. I mean, if my phrasing created a vulnerability for the information to be interpreted in that way, I will change my phrasing. No, because it's
you
it's very
misunderstood me.
important.
I'm not saying you specifically.
I know you're not. I know you're not saying,
you specifically, sir. I'm saying people who understand that doctrine flips it and making a statement, an argument of what I've just quoted.
Yeah, no.
And it kind of fit what you were saying along with your explanation. So that's why I used that quote.
No, I think
not
it's
to
a
put
good
you on the spot, but it was just perfect. That's all.
Look, nobody.
And what I was trying to say, this is one of these Aboriginals arguments that they use. So I'm just using these things to try to bring peace, not to dispute. But this is one of what y'all call abos will say. So by listening, I'm using this opportunity to hopefully nip some things in the bud.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to respond. No, look, I mean, I want to make sure. I mean, I understand you didn't interpret it that way, but you saw how people could interpret it that way, and so I want to be careful because your point is a very good one. Is that people will use things to run with it to justify discrimination, right? And we just have to be sort of forever vigilant about people taking things and running with them in a way that is evil and that is discriminatory and and as I said, bad people will always do bad things, and racists are going to jump on anything they can and run with it. And that's what we're up against. And it, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But you can always come back to, look, we all owe our survival. We all owe all of our fundamental humanity, including our brains, to these Africans that survived 70,000 years ago. We wouldn't be here if they hadn't been unbelievably resilient and have survived catastrophic climate changes, and that they think there was a bottleneck where there may have been several million Homo sapiens, and they got down to a very small population and survived, and so if somebody wants to discriminate, nothing I can do to stop them other than keep pounding the facts. Just that's a fact. They wouldn't be here today as a racist asshole if it weren't for some Africans 70,000 years ago.
Oh, that's a scientific fact there.
So I mean, that's one way you could come back at it. But I hope that answered your question. But for other people, never. I mean, I'm always open to being put on the spot because
they hit you.
I can make mistakes.
Yeah, but I you know what? For me, I don't mind being put on the spot with a clear, concise question that's not based off of my misunderstanding of evolution. That's when it get wild for me. Like if you thinking cars just come from the ocean and you ask me a question based off of cars coming from the ocean, it becomes foolery for me. And I don't even need that right now. That's all I'm saying. It's wild for me. Gideon, did you have something to say? Because we're at the end of it.
Well, I also saw I had a card that covered the chat, so I've seen a couple of questions in the chat that I'll be glad to respond to. I'm sorry.
All right, well, go ahead. If you're seeing something in the chat, get it in real quick, and
Yeah.
then he's gonna finish off
Yeah,
in the chat, and we're gonna close it out. Go ahead, get in.
All right, on number 7, right, when you were talking about the hyperactivity thing,
Mm-hmm.
How I want to frame the question right. How advanced, if any, is the evolutionary process to your knowledge base, based on that, since these mechanisms are co-opting the mechanism of our nature as human beings?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you mind repeating it?
Yeah. So based on the mechanisms that's co-opting, like you were explaining, like how religion co-opted the natural mechanisms that we have as human beings, like how advanced is our evolutionary process as human beings based on that,
Okay.
if any?
Well, I think that's where the Leitner and Hagen paper is really good. The tendency has been to see us as kind of stupid for having these religious beliefs, and the mechanisms that go into religion are mechanisms that were crucial for our survival. And religions, in a sense, hijack these things, but their uses far outweigh their misuses. I mean, none of us would be here without the attachment mechanism, and religion misuses it. But we're far advanced. I mean, we're not the last surviving hominid by accident. We've got extraordinary social cognition, and one of the side effects has been, one of the prices we've paid for it is religious belief. But some of those religious beliefs probably helped our ancestors survive, and that's the strength of the paper I'll send to Bobby, is that they point out that not all models are true, but some of the models that our ancestors had helped them survive a world in which all the forces that could potentially crush them were largely individual. I'm sorry, largely invisible, and the mechanisms helped them survive. And some of them spilled over into more formal religions. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Very excellently. Thank you.
But we shouldn't sort of laugh at our ancestors' religions. They may seem strange to us now, and human narcissism, we want to distance ourselves from them, but we wouldn't be here without them.
Understood.
Now, the questions in the chat that I didn't see because it was I had a card taped over it. Let me just look real quickly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I did have one from the chat, if you don't mind, real quick.
No, please go ahead.
A good friend, while you're looking. Darn. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Let me find it real quick. I'm so sorry. This is from Zane, actually.
Did you find it? I thought he had it, Juju. The questions.
I did. I just clicked my screen off by accident because I was.
Did we leave Anthony out of this? Anthony, hold on. Was you around Anthony, or you stuck? Anthony might have been somewhere else.
Nah, I'm here, man. I've been.
Did we skip
totally? No, I didn't have nothing, man. I just enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I'm learning, dude. You know how I am when I'm out of my lane. Yeah, I'm good, man. Go ahead.
All right.
I do appreciate your presentation there, Dr. Andy. I do appreciate it.
Powerful. Thank you for coming. There's some good questions in the chat. Let me.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna block out. Go ahead.
There's some really good ones.
There's one by Vyasa. If you see that one, it was early on.
Which one?
His name is Vyasa, He was sourcing a scientist or someone, and the question had to do, and this is going by memory because I'm still looking for it, had to do with Corto University. Here I go. Juju asks if he is aware of Tetsuro Matsuzawa works and how he said we lost short-term memory as we gain the ability to speak.
We lose short-term memory as we gain the ability to speak.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with that work. I'm not sure about that.
I'm familiar with the idea because chimpanzees have a great short-term memory. They do these tests, right? And you see the chimpanzees, they can hit them colors, bah, 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 bah. They beat a human every time. And that's based off of the fact that they have a great short-term memory, better than ours.
Yeah, it was Kyoto University. I guess it was a Japanese scientist. Just assuming though, but that was the question.
Chimps. I think the study was based off the chimps.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't surprise me. But the way to think about that is so that capacity helped them solve a particular problem in their environment. So any trait is an adaptation that is a problem-solving device. So that capacity would have evolved because it helped them solve survival problems in their in their environment that they evolved in. So and that's a way to think about any sort of fundamental human trait. And those traits may not work well in the modern environment, like our cravings for sugar. Somebody put a question in, where can we read about free will and decision making? So Sam Harris has a great book on free will. It's short, it's fantastic, published in 2012. He's got great videos on free will, excellent, worth watching. Robert Sapolsky has a book coming out that's going to be nothing but free will, but you can get up to speed on it. He's got they're great videos where he talks about free will. The Huberman podcast, he interviews him. And chapter 16 in his book Behave is fantastic. Jerry Coyne, his blog site, Why Evolution is True. Jerry Coyne has great writings on free will. Those are the three people I would read about. They write well, and the thinking is clear. Let's see. There's a question from Marcus about split brain experiments and how the brain creates narratives. Yes, we fill in those things that we don't understand. That's the work of Michael Gazangana, I think. It's worth no, because when we don't understand something, we'll make up a story to cover explanation. And the split brain experiments were beautiful. It showed that was our left hemisphere making up stuff to cover our ignorance. Let's see, there's a question about where does psychopathy come from. Look up the term frequency dependent selection. So if you've got a group of people, psychopathy can evolve, cheaters can evolve as long as they're a small percentage of the population. They can get away with it. So you can have a small percentage of psychopaths in any population. You can't have a huge population of psychopaths because then nobody's going to survive. But the theory is that psychopathy evolved through a mechanism called frequency-dependent selection. And any population of humans is always going to have a small percentage. It's genetic. Let's see. Where does narcissism come from? How did Homo sapiens get it? Again, narcissism was probably selected for, particularly in males. I'm trying to think. I can't. If you look up evolutionary psychology and narcissism, the papers will pull up. There's a a German researcher whose name I can't come up with at the moment, who's written about that. But it's probably a personality trait, genetic, and it was selected for because it had reproductive advantages. And it's found, again, it's probably frequency dependent. I mean, if everybody was a selfish narcissist, the group would not survive, but you can have frequency dependent selection for it probably. But I'm not an expert on that. Xenophobia, how does it affect Homo sapiens? Where does it come from? Again, we're biased towards in-group loyalty, out-group hatred. And it's xenophobia is out-group hatred on a large scale. I mean, you remember our ancestors, we see more strangers in a day than our ancestors saw in a lifetime, right? And the greatest threat to any small group of human beings was another group of human beings. Resources were scarce, and there's again, I can't remember the man's name. There's a great book called War Before Civilization, and there's also Pinker's book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. I mean, the ancestral the death rate in hunter-gatherer societies was probably 40% of males died at the hands of other males.
Wow.
So, and killing was adaptive. Men who had killed had more wives and children. And again, why? Well, I mean, think if you're a woman in an ancestral environment, who are you gonna mate with? The Rock or Woody Allen?
Let me add something to this. Does that actually vary from continent, or was this before Homo sapiens left the continent?
No, I think, again, I'm not an expert. I think the thinking is that we have violent capacities because they were crucial to our survival.
Got you.
And again, we have to be humble before the facts of human nature. I mean, we all sit on violent capacities. The good news is it looks like we are a domesticated species. In other words, if you look at the brains of human beings 10,000 years ago, the skulls of human beings 10,000 years ago, they're different from our skulls. Our skulls have the marker of domestication. We're less violent. Our canines are smaller. There are other things. And there's an anthropologist that has a great book on this called but if you just look up domestication of human beings, it'll pull up. But we're less violent than our ancestors, but we're still pretty violent. There's one other question I want to get to, which is important because it has to do with all of us and our children and the school systems. It has a question about
it's the last one. Go ahead.
About ADHD. Is ADHD a Neanderthal trait, and is it good or bad for Homo sapiens? I will send the paper to Bobby. So ADHD may be a suite of traits that was very useful in ancestral environments. It's called the response-ready individual. And I feel very strongly about this because I'm a psychiatrist and I see a lot of ADHD patients who think they've got broken brains. And the man, Peter Jensen, I think his name was, who was the chief of child and adolescent psychiatry at NIH back in the 1990s. And he and a group of people wrote this paper published in the top journal in child psychiatry on ADHD as the response-ready individual, that it was a suite of traits that were adaptive in ancestral environments. Look at the description of ADHD. It's the description of a hunter. Look at the description of ADHD. It's the description of a defensive lineman in football. It's not accidental that many great athletes have ADHD because it's very useful. You jump first, ask questions later. And we tend to see it as a broken brain. We're 300,000 years old. Modern classroom is 300 years old. And I think if you know people with ADHD who feel bad about it, I think you want to try to say, wait a second, you don't have a brain disorder. You may not have a brain disorder. You may not have a broken brain. You have a brain that doesn't work well in modern classroom. And I had a patient who was a phenomenal athlete and obviously, struggled to get through University of Virginia. And he thought there was something wrong with his brain. And this guy was a gifted athlete, and he came back after 5 or 6 years to get his degree from UVA. He wanted to get his degree, and in the interim, he had been working as an outdoorsman, a ski instructor, canoe instructor. And he was superlative at the job. And I think he was superlative at the job in part because he had ADHD. He was a response-ready, athletic individual. His brain just didn't work well in an accounting class. And I'll try to send that paper to Bobby, because I think that's another, again, where evolution matters, where understanding human evolution and the environments that we evolved in is important for education. And it, as I talked about earlier, it may be crucial to understanding what's the greatest problem facing us these days. It's heart disease, obesity, diabetes, and people get blamed for it, where, we're all vulnerable to it because we have preferences for food that don't fit in the modern environment.
Absolutely. Okay, man, we'll end right there, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. Man, we appreciate
thank you. Thank you all for hanging in there for 3.5 hours. I mean,
that's what we do.
You guys are endurance athletes. So
there you go.
That's funny.
But let me leave you with one last exercise.
All right,
because you can talk to the group. Okay, so here's an exercise that people can do based on this lecture. Okay, and if all it takes is 2 people. If there are 3 or 4, it's even better. But when you're in a group, do 3 things. Ask yourself just how you're feeling, right? How am I feeling right now? First question. Number 2, think about somebody who you're in conflict with and how you feel about that person. Number 2. Third thing is take the back of your hand, your skin, and pinch it and get the most pain you can get out of pinching your skin. Those 3 things. Then stand up, put your arms around each other, and start swaying back and forth. Okay, so that's touch, rhythmic movement, and then sing your favorite hymn. Right? Sing happy birthday, but make music, loud singing, right? Back and forth. Okay. And just do it for like a minute or 2. And yes, you're going to feel embarrassed and self-conscious, but just go, back and forth. That's touch, symmetric movement, making music. Okay. Then stop and then do it backwards. Look for your pain threshold. Pinch your hand and see if you can find your pain threshold. I'll wager you it'll be very hard to induce the same amount of pain. Second thing is, think about that person you're in conflict with. You're not going to be as angry. It's going to be harder to generate the same degree of annoyance that you had before the exercise. Then also think about how you're feeling, right? And if you can put the self-consciousness and embarrassment away about doing the exercise, and I think you'll notice just feeling a little bit better, okay? That went into rituals. That's our ancient rituals. Song, dance, and touch. And you're just doing it for 2 or 3 minutes. Imagine doing it for 6 or 8 hours like the Aborigines did. Okay? But try that exercise, because that's the proof of the pudding of what I was talking about. The core of ritual and religious ritual.
Hey, we got that, man. Appreciate it, man. Y'all know what it is, man. The Center for the Study of Pseudoisms. Pseudo Killers on deck, man. Community Skeptics. It's been a great interview. Appreciate you, Andy, man. We're going to continue our conversation, man. Hope you can stop by again when you're free. All right. And, man, it's been a high-level conversation, man. Man, we've made a playlist of our high-level conversations with the experts, and this definitely goes up to the top, man. Very educational, man. Go back, listen to the downloads, man. Like and subscribe to the channel, man. We're dedicated to fighting the pseudoisms in our community. We are skeptical of human beings. Man, I appreciate the process, man, and respect it, man. It's the Pseudo Killers, man, the community skeptics, man, and we're doing exactly what we want to do, man. We want to get us out of here with something real smooth. You know what I'm saying? The Lady Pseudo Killers, man. It is what it is, man.
Dr. Andy, you the man. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man. I'll let you later on. Y'all know what it is, man. Pseudo Killers official. Ain't nothing but love, man. That's how we doing it. Y'all know what it is, man. Wanted to bring Ghana on, but he's disrespectful. That Ghana guy, he doesn't know how to form a question properly. Appreciate everybody. Man, it's one of them great shows, man. You know how we doing it, man. All day, y'all. Hey, man, if you're in the Discord, man, we going right in the Discord and talk about the high-level conversation. Man, hit that cash app, man. I appreciate that love, man. If you enjoyed the lecture and the conversation, man, hit the daggone cash app, man. If you didn't, hey, man, just like and subscribe. Hit it going out the door, hit it coming in. You know what we doing, man. We're going to be in that Discord. We're going to finish that conversation. I seen you, Tamika. What do you mean? Yeah, man, that's how we get to end up. We're going to bring a linguist on next. See if the greater Sahotep know what he talking about. We ain't playing around here, man. We getting it in all the way, man. Scientific literacy is a vaccine against the charlatans in the community, y'all. It is, man. Get all the stars in here tonight. Ready on? A lot of stars, man. Regular Joe, Tamika, Chef Fresnel, Hezekiah, Gala, Skinny TV, Gina A. Man, like and subscribe, man. Rich Papa T. We here, man. And y'all know a pseudo gonna die they source, man. Expect more content like this, man. Get it out to the family, man. High-level conversations, man. We ain't playing. All day, every day, man. This is Bobby Banger, man. Community Skeptic Pseudo Killers, man. We appreciate Andy coming through with the insight on our high-level conversation, man. Man, see y'all in the Discord, man, the after show. We going on later on. Y'all can come on and express yourself. With that, man, Bobby Banger, a.k.a. God Killer, big up to the atheists. And with that, we out.